Okay, it's 7:02, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order and ask that we all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Prior to moving on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda, I'd like to take a moment and ask everyone for a moment of silence. As many of you know, the Greenwich Public School community recently experienced a loss with the untimely passing of one of our beloved teachers, Mr. Joseph Baskey, who passed away unexpectedly, and the loss is going to be felt deeply throughout our entire school community. He was a valued member of our social studies department and touched many lives, students and colleagues during the 27 years at which he taught at Greenwich High School. He will be greatly missed, and our hearts are with his wife, Michelle, his children, his family, and the extended community of students who have had the pleasure of having him as an educator. And with that, I'd like to just ask for a quick moment of silence. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Kathleen? Okay, all in favor? Yes. I don't think we approved all of them, no. I can go back and look. I don't think we did. I think one of them was on and then we hadn't actually approved it at that meeting. The whole package was taken down and we had to re-vote on them. All right, all in favor? Sorry, and I can't see. Wendy, are you all in favor? Yes. Oh, okay. So that is a 701. And they pass. Okay. Next on our agenda are public comments, starting with the high school student government. I see our gentleman there. Come on up.
Can you hear me? All right. Hi, Chair Hirsch, Dr. Jones, and members of the board. I hope everyone had a relaxing April break. My name is Mihir Shah, and I'm the Student Body Vice President at Greenwich High School. April is the last full month of classes for many of the seniors, as next month most of us are going to be off in our communities, engaging in the workforce on internship or doing a project. I'll be out working for Mrs. Marinaccio at wisdom.io for those wondering. I'd first like to start by describing the many events that took place this past month in student government. The sophomores are working on organizing a fun run in May, a 5K, and other activities to enjoy the amazing weather we've been having. The juniors are also in the midst of planning fundraisers and events to cap off their junior year. And we seniors are working on ending the high school on a high note with events, games, and spirit in the coming weeks and numerous senior events to end the year. Finally, our student government elections for the 2025-26 school year are kicking off with many candidates running for each position. Election day is May 29th, and we'll share our updates next month. As for the upcoming school budget, many of the students have been following the budget discussion and are frustrated that the Board of Ed has to find more than $4 million to cut out from our schools. We heard about the idea to move the GHS start time from 7:30 a.m. as a way to save $2.5 million to avoid cutting many teachers. In our mass meeting, we discussed this idea, and several students support taking gradual steps towards a 7:30 a.m. start, but also want to ensure that the entire community has a chance to share input on this big decision. for example, we could start at 8 o'clock one year and then 7:45, then 7:30, instead of just going from 8:30 to 7:30. The GHS student government will solicit feedback from many students as this conversation continues in our town over the next few weeks. Thanks for having me once again. It's always an honor to speak at the board about all the great things at GHS. And now I'd like to introduce our student body president, Rocky.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Jones, and esteemed community members. As always, it's great to be here to share some updates about student government and our efforts to improve the school community. First, some updates on our student government subcommittees. The Community Service Subcommittee, chaired by Layla Galal, hosted their GHS Community Service Fair yesterday in the Media Center, bringing over 12 local nonprofit organizations for students to help out and earn community service hours from. Overall, the event was a major success, and we hope that this event will be passed down by future student governments. Additionally, the subcommittee will be hard at work organizing the annual Red Cross blood drive, which is set to take place on April 30th. Meanwhile, the advisor-based subcommittee, headed by Angela Bai, is looking to implement more auditorium-based events for next year's AB schedule after the sophomore class's success with their AB Jeopardy event. Some considerations include bringing in guest speakers for special holidays and commemorations, social emotional learning lectures, and engaging fun activities like Jeopardy. Lastly, as Mihir said, looking forward to our end of year plans. Our student government elections are set to kick off this week, and our new student body president and vice president will be joining us at our last Board of Education meeting together in June. Thank you for your dedicated support, and we're excited to share updates again at our next meeting.
Thanks, guys. And I know it's going to be really hard to keep focused on schoolwork with the lovely weather outside, but just remember, you only have a month. Just dig in there. Exactly, but who's counting? Next up, we have GEA comments. Comments from Lil here. I see you hiding over there. Come on down.
I got props, John.
Yeah.
Good evening, Chair Hirsch, Dr. Jones, board members, teachers, parents, students, and our entire Greenwich community members. I'm Lillian Perrone, president of the Greenwich Education Association. You know, I was looking back over the last 5 years of speeches during this time of year, and I noticed a trend. Now, this may come as a surprise to you all standing here, that this trend, GEA, seems to always be standing here and asking the BET to fund the budget. And here I am again, standing before all of you and asking the BET to reconsider the sum of the RTM and fund the Board of Ed fiscally responsible budget. Go figure. These 6 BET members are spin masters trying to mislead the public with false narratives. Again, saying that our teachers are paid too much. The BET and the town were at the table. I know because I was there for the last 5 negotiations. We want to hire the least expensive teacher. Yep, that's all what we do in real life. We hire the least qualified to build our homes, the least qualified surgeons. I think not. Again, every year, the same 6 who shall not be named talk about absenteeism. Trending absentee rate in Connecticut and nationally has trended higher. And yes, in Greenwich, it is trending a bit higher. Maybe we should ask why. We're told we're paid too much. We're taking too many sick days. But we are short paras, short substitutes, and we need to cover classes, give up prep time, pick up work of unfilled positions. Now, I know teachers have been called superheroes, but you know, I have to tell you, we do get overwork. We laugh, we do cry, we get stressed, we get sick. We have family members that are sick, we have children that are sick. We are humans too. It is very hurtful. These continued attacks against teachers and lack of respect for teachers must stop. My teachers are upset about this, and if it hurts teachers, it's not good for students. We have all have seen and lived through the havoc of not funding our school buildings. These conditions are unsustainable. Our students, family, and staff deserve more, and Greenwich has more to give. We need to fully fund our budget. These continued cuts in order to keep the mill rate as flat as possible are not only decimating to our schools, but negatively impact our entire community. The hallmark of a Greenwich education has always been for striving for excellence, is what our students deserve and what our parents have come to expect. Our educators are dedicated professionals who diligently work and go above and beyond every day to serve the needs of every student. Greenwich deserves nothing less. I'd like to close, make a public announcement as Chair Hirsch has mentioned. It was a very difficult situation, but sometimes in the darkest era or time in life, there shines a bright light to keep you going. And the amount of work that Dr. Jones and Ralph and Dana did to help organize letting staff go to the services, the administrators, all who stepped up, all of them played an important role to doing double duty and covering in their building. So administrators came to the high school to cover classes. Teachers volunteered and pick up classes. That's what Greenwich is about. We stand up together in the darkest times, and there's always a ray of light here, and we show up and do the best. That's why I wore the hands. These are the hands of a community that lift us up. Our students, our staff, our administrators, our parents. I asked the BET to take the hair hands out of their pockets. And 30 cents a day is small change for big impact and students. BET, please fund our schools. And I won't give out your phone numbers, don't worry. Thank you.
Thank you, Lil. Next up, comments from PTA Council. Do I see John Fisher? No. Is there an elephant in there? Please, I hope. I miss my buddy.
We shall see, shall we? Chair Hirsch, BOE members, Superintendent Dr. Jones, everyone here and online. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm John Fisher, Greenwich PTA Council President, parent of 2 of the 8,513 great kids in the Greenwich Public Schools. PTA Council is a nonpartisan umbrella organization made up by and for the 15 PTAs in town, with just under 4,000 PTA families who invest millions of dollars and hundreds of volunteer hours every year to enhance the learning experience for every student and to support our teachers in our schools. We also want to add, in regards to Mr. Baskey, that he was truly a beloved part of the community, and we extend our condolences to his wife, Michelle, and his children, Genevieve and Joe, and his colleagues and his students at GHS, and his friends, and everyone whose lives he touched. Next, we want to add a round of huzzas on the groundbreaking at OGS today. We thank and congratulate everyone who worked and jumped through countless hoops and did whatever was needed to be done to bring the OGS renovation to life, especially the building committee, James Waters, Dr. Mercanthe Anthony. Isn't it amazing what can be accomplished with appropriate funding and support? So let's talk about the elephant in the room. The BET vote put a huge budget sinkhole under the BOE, the administration, the schools, and the community. It's pathetic that an elephant-sized hole has dredged up discussions about dumping investments that are producing gains in the quality of our schools. Returning the GHS students to an early start time, early years ALP and foreign language. The community advocated for years to get these things in place to create better academic outcomes and better student achievements. And this community isn't accepting this. The first selectman issued a public statement asking the BET to reconsider the budget. and specifically to reconsider the school's budget. The RTM on Monday overwhelmingly passed a sense of the meeting resolution asking the BET to reopen the operating budget vote to better meet the financial needs of the Greenwich Public Schools. There's an online community petition with over 1,600 signatures now and counting, urging the BET to call a special meeting before May 5th and to increase funding to better meet the financial needs of the Greenwich Public Schools. We note the action item on the agenda, BET reduction from fiscal year 26 BOE operating budget. Don't know what that is, but we suggest that it should be a vote on a sense of the meeting resolution from the BOE to the BET, requesting them to reopen the operating budget vote and to increase funding to better meet the financial needs of the Greenwich Public Schools. I'll close by noting that National Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up. It starts on May 5th, ironically enough. There's no better way to demonstrate teacher appreciation than having everyone support better funding for the schools and the students, and to support the teachers who pour their hearts and souls into the schools and the students every day. Meanwhile, it seems like only yesterday that we were discussing the superintendent's contract extension. With that, I'll thank you for your public service and for this time to speak.
Thank you, John, and Mr. Elephant for coming up here. Always my favorite. Next up, we have community comments. Just please remember, you have 3 minutes to speak. Our secretary will call and bring you up. If you run over, please feel free to submit your written comments to us afterwards. And we just asked everybody's respectful. I know we have a long meeting and some deep discussions ahead. So with that, we look forward to hearing from you all.
All right, I'm going to try and prioritize those with children so that you can get home and do homework and all the other things you might need to do. So the first on the list is Peter Schwartzstein and children. The second speaker is Sabrina, age 9. She will be next. You can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on whether you want me to interrupt you with a 30-second time cue.
Thank you to the board and Dr. Jones for allowing people to share comments today. My name is Peter Schwartzstein. My 3 kids and I recently spoke at a BET public hearing. And I won't reiterate everything we said in that meeting. Obviously, you know what happened at the BET after that meeting. In the wake of the BET making that irrational and frankly unjustified decision to defund our schools, you all are faced with incredibly tough decisions, basically only tough decisions at this point, unless something does change, as John mentioned. Given that reality, we as the Greenwich community need to prioritize and protect programs that, number one, advance student performance in math, reading, and writing. In other words, core academic skills. And number two, prioritize those that provide social and emotional learning benefits to our students that support their learning and development. And you look at all the programs and policies and expenditures that you all are going to be looking at and potentially facing tough decisions about. There's one program that accomplishes both of these goals, that serves to advance our students' performance in those key academic programs, and that provides social and emotional benefits to all students, not just to a specific group of students, and that's the advanced learning program. And again, I know it's impossible for you all to choose among all the great programs that Greenwich Public Schools offer, but when you look at the advanced learning program, when you look at what ALP does, both for the students who need more and for the students who are not pulled out from the class, but then have a teacher who's able to differentiate for those students and not face a situation where I need to teach at multiple levels in the same classroom, which only leads to problems with class discipline and with students getting unruly. Frankly, I was at a school in the suburbs of Boston growing up, public school, and it was a town very similar to Greenwich. It did not have a program like ALP in my elementary school. And I was that kid who was acting out because I was bored. And, I think my daughter Morgan, who's 12, she's at CMS. I think she would say that before she was in ALP, she faced some of those challenges and things really changed for her in second and third grade and beyond. So, again, at the end of the day, I'm not going to go through all the arguments for ALP. I think you've heard them all, you recognize them all. But I just want to stand up here and say, I've heard so many great stories about the ALP program from other parents. We've seen it with our own kids. It's a program that's not inexpensive, but it's a program that services both the students who are pulled out and the students who are left in that classroom. And I want to just end by having my daughter Morgan share a couple quick comments.
The OUT program has
30
changed
seconds.
The OUT program has changed my life. Please don't destroy this opportunity for my younger brothers and so many students in the future.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have Sabrina?
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. My name is Sabrina Hess. I'm a fourth grade student at Coscub Elementary, where I'm a member of Student Council. I'm also in all 3 ALP classes, or ALP classes. I know you have difficult decisions to make, but before you do, I want you to understand how important ALP is to kids like me. Before ALP, I got yelled at for finishing my math assignment quickly and working on to the next lesson. I didn't even want to go to school anymore. In ALP, I get to do challenging work that pushes me to explore topics more deeply. It's actually fun, and now I have friends whose brains work like mine. In ALP, we get to do extra projects on things we're excited about. A couple weeks ago, one of my ALP science classmates did a project on sodium chloride. That's table salt. It wasn't an assignment, he just thought it was really interesting and wanted to do a presentation for the class. And our teacher, our math ALP teacher and science ALP teacher, Mr. Musia, let him. ALP is the only place we get to do things like that. In ALP English, I discovered I really like writing poetry. My teacher, Miss Saar, has been encouraging me, so I wrote some over break for my grandmother. I am also working on my first novel. I got the first 7 chapters done, and Miss Saar let me share it with the class. I'm in 4th grade ALP math, and we are doing 5th grade math, and I'm doing well in it. If you cut ALP, then I'll have to do 5th grade math again next year. It doesn't seem fair that I wouldn't get to learn anything new in math for a whole year. Having a few of us in ALP also means my homeroom teacher has more time for the other kids, and she can focus her lessons at the right level for them. So ALP is even good for kids who aren't in ALP. Please save ALP, including for the 2nd graders. We really need it.
I neglected to say that next is Jack, aged 9.
And while Jack's walking up here, I was going to say, when you're done with that novel, can I read it? I can't wait. I hope to get a copy of that.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Hi, my name is Jack Gregory. I'm a 4th grader at Parkway Elementary School, and I disagree with the reduction of $4.1 million to the Greenwich Public Schools budget, and this is why. My 1st grade teacher, Miss Malika, taught me how to read, and now I'm trying out for reading ALP. My 2nd grade teacher had to leave in the middle of the year. We were fortunate enough to have an amazing substitute teacher, Mrs. Hand, who is now a permanent teacher in GPS. She taught us math and was very kind to everyone. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Griffin, was wonderful. She was kind and very patient. My ability to speak in public started with her. Now in 4th grade, math got hard, and guess who came to my rescue? My 4th grade teacher, Mr. Wolfgerber, and now I'm beginning to feel confident. He is strict, but for the good of the class. There are more staff members at Parkway that contribute to our success, like Miss Atanazia, our librarian, and Mr. John and Mr. Young, our custodians, who saved my friend James's ball from our sewer, or Miss Steele, the art teacher. My sister would have never found her passion for art without her. In conclusion, please reconsider these budget cuts, and at the very least, please protect the wonderful people and programs in our school. Thank you.
Next are the grant kids.
Good evening. My name is Gavin Grant, and I'm a second grader at Parkway Elementary. I moved to Parkway from my private school because of ALP, program starting in second grade. ALP has allowed me to grow and feel seen. I love my teacher, and the thought of that changing makes me sad. Please don't cut out. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Vivian Grant, and I'm a fifth grader at Parkway School. I'll be going to Western Middle School next year and was looking forward to middle school sports. Sports brings people together and helps make new friendships. It's especially important for the sixth graders because we are new to the school. Middle school wouldn't be the same without sports. This year, I had a school play at Parkway School, and the person in charge of that is my music teacher. I have heard that her budget is being cut. Please do not cut sports in my music teacher's budget. Thank you. Hi, my name is Scarlett Kaufman. I'm a fourth grader attending Parkway School, and I disagree with the deduction of $4.05 million. Here is why. Greenwich Public Schools does so much for us. They help us all meet the standards. And when I was in second grade and I wasn't in an ALP class yet, I was already learning stuff that I already knew. And if we cut that again and we can't go to ALP again, I'm gonna lose that opportunity, and I'm just gonna be learning the same things again and again. Thank you.
Next is Carrie Bruce and you're not Carrie, but you look just like her.
Hi, my name is Taylor Goose, and I'm a seventh grader at Central. I want to speak on the behalf of middle school sports. I play softball and basketball for CMS, and today I had a game-winning 3-run homer for Central. It was such an awesome feeling for the team to be cheering me on and celebrating me and our win. Riding back on the bus to school with my team was just such an incredible feeling. I take pride in wearing my jersey to school on game days, and CMS winning the girls basketball championship was one of the highlights of my winter. Middle school sports gives me the ability to bond with kids from other grades and other classes. It makes me feel like a larger part of my CMS community. My middle school experience would be absolutely worsened if this wasn't able to be such an important part of my life. Thank you.
Was she yielding the rest of her time up to?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You are, yeah.
Hi, my name is Anya Gajewski. I will be a sixth grader here at Central next year. If you would ask me what I was most excited for in my middle school journey, it would be playing soccer for the school. I've heard middle school is hard no matter what, but I know the ropes of joining a team, the sense of belonging, community, and pride you will build with your team. To deprive anyone of that during such crucial years of development is incredibly detrimental to one's mental health and social emotional learning. Studies have shown that one of the only touch points for children in our tech-driven world to build community is through playing sports together. Think about the children that will now not have a practice to go to and have to go home and sit in front of more screens instead. It has been said that in our town, kids play club sports. My club, a local club, cost my parents $3,500 for me to play in. I'm here to advocate for the children that don't have that alternative access. You may also ask where I learned my ability to speak so poised. You can thank my music teacher at Parkway Elementary, whose budget may be at risk of cutting. She also heads our school play each year, teaching confidence, public speaking, and articulation. These line items are what really builds education and develops a healthy child. Thank you.
Thank you, kids. Next up is Miss Jen Bensavenko.
I know this is a tough act to follow. Good evening, members of the board. Dr. Jones, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on behalf of GOSA. David Wacko, my co-president, sends his regrets and asked me to speak on behalf of the Greenwich Organization of School Administrators. I also want to thank you, those of you who came to our groundbreaking. It was magical. We appreciate your dedication and leadership as we work together to navigate difficult budgetary decisions. GOSA still holds out hope that the BET will reconsider the arbitrary and capricious decision they made to reduce the Board of Ed operating budget. We hear regularly from teachers and administrators still working each day with the highest standards of excellence while riddled with anxiety about the safety of their jobs. This is not the Greenwich I have worked in since, as my daughter reminds me, the 1900s. Was 1998. Our highest priority remains preserving the quality of education for our students, especially where it matters most, in the classrooms. With that in mind, we strongly advocate for protecting class sizes, mental health services, and maintaining our current teaching and administrative positions. Research consistently shows that smaller class sizes correlate with higher student achievement, particularly in the early grades and for students who need the most support. Maintaining our current staffing level allows us to continue delivering personalized instruction and building stronger relationships between educators and students, relationships that are foundational to academic and social emotional success. To reduce costs with the least disruption to student learning, we hesitantly support the discussed proposal to modify the start time at all schools. While later start times have been advocated in recent years, the research on the issue is not unanimous. A comprehensive 2021 study published in Sleep Health found that later high school start times did not lead to significant improvements in academic performance across diverse populations. In fact, the data shows it is not start time that makes the impact, but having our students achieve 8 to 10 hours of undisturbed sleep each night with limited distraction of screens from phones and computers. Additionally, an earlier end to the school day allows for greater flexibility in after-school employment, extracurricular sports and club participation, and family responsibilities, benefits that matter deeply to many of our high school students and their families. We also very hesitantly support your discussion of only a modest reduction in the advanced learning program at the elementary level, specifically the second grade and science programs, both of which are strictly enrichment and not tied to pacing or further advanced learning opportunities at the additional grade levels. While we value enrichment and rigor, research has shown that homogeneous groupings of students, especially at young ages, can inadvertently reinforce achievement gaps and limit peer collaboration. A 2016 meta-analysis published in the Review of Educational Research revealed that heterogeneous classrooms with differentiated instruction often yield equal or better academic outcomes, particularly when teachers are supported with appropriate resources and training. We believe that excellence can be fostered inclusively and that strong instruction benefits all learners. In closing, we thank you again for your time, attention, and thoughtful stewardship. These are not easy decisions, but by keeping students at the center and focusing our strategies that maximize impact while minimizing disruption, we believe we can move forward together. Thank you.
Next up, we have a very familiar face who used to sit at this table, Miss Laura Erickson.
Good evening, Dr. Jones and members of the Board of Education. I am speaking tonight regarding the anticipated reductions to the BOE-approved fiscal year 26 budget resulting from the BET Decision Day actions. After a lengthy, thorough vetting of the budget by your administrative team, your board, and the full-day BET Budget Committee meeting, a precipitous vote to cut over $4 million at this stage in the process is regrettable. I understand that one of the options on the table is rolling back school start times at the high school from 8:30 to 7:30 a.m. And on this point, I wish to give some perspective on the process that was followed in my capacity as former chair of the board during the several months this issue was debated. It was an extensive process, and we heard from many members of the public, both pro and con, all of which is documented on board docs if you care to revisit. The board voted 5-3 in June 2016 to adopt a later start time as of the 2017-2018 school year. And I think it's fair to say that that board vote was representative of the larger community concerns. It would be unfortunate to roll back the start times without a similar process, although I realize that $2.5 million is a significant chunk of what you're trying to find. The later start time has been in place for 6 years now, and I think this might be a case of the toothpaste is out of the tube, especially when there are ongoing statewide efforts to adopt the later start. Now I'm putting on my hat as a former BET member, and I would suggest respectfully that you do the work and make your best effort to find cost savings that have the least impact to staff and students, and then seek an interim for the balance, which will give you the time to present previously reported and new information. This should also include an analysis of what the BOE budget would look like without the costs of private school transportation, which used to be carried on the town's budget, and then the capital items, which are transferred from capital to operating, which also includes digital learning. These accounting changes weren't meant to be punitive. I haven't done the analysis, but I think it should be done to make sure that isn't the case. I urge you to make the best decisions in the interest of our students and staff for the right reasons, and not because an arbitrary number is before you. Thank you for your time and your service.
Next up, we have John Simone. I don't know if he's online or.
He is online, Mr. Simone. If you unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak.
Okay, you can go ahead. If he's having trouble, maybe we should come back to him.
I think that would be best. It seems like he isn't unmuting. Maybe he stepped away from his computer.
Okay, next is Jonathan Prosterman.
Thank you, Board, Dr. Jones, giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to take a short period of time to advocate for the ALP program in the hope that it will not be impacted by the potential budget cuts. This program has a profound impact, shaping the lives of many students, and I want to make sure it does not get pared back or reduced. What amounts to smaller dollars has an outside ability to change our kids' lives. I have seen in my own son, and I'm a parent of 2 Glenville elementary schoolers, how he is engaged and loving learning because ALP has been able to challenge him at a young age. It's really made a difference. The depth and pace of study of ALP provides and helps and ensures our children remain engaged and really on a path that influences the rest of their lives. You go from elementary school being bored to challenged and interested in loving learning, and I can see it, and it's so important at young ages and throughout the time. ALP is essential for my children and many others. So thank you for your consideration, and I strongly encourage us to keep that funded fully.
Thank you. Next up is Karen Kraus.
Good evening. My name is Karen Kraus. I've lived in Greenwich for over a decade, and my husband graduated from Greenwich High School. I'm here tonight because we both believe deeply in the Greenwich Public Schools mission. The Board of Education is in an unenviable position, being forced to scale back programs our community values. As you make these hard choices, I urge you, let the Greenwich Public Schools mission be your unwavering guide. That mission begins with two fundamental promises. First, to educate all students to the highest level of academic achievement, and second, to enable them to reach and expand their potential. This mission must be priority number one. Programs like ALP, which have provided academic rigor for advanced learners in our district since 1961, along with AP courses and the resources needed for manageable class sizes, are not extras. They are essential tools to fulfill that mission. Cutting them erodes the foundation of academic excellence that GPS promises. It risks diminishing the potential we are sworn to nurture in every child. Worse, cutting academic programs disproportionately harms our most vulnerable students, those whose families can't afford private school or after-school academic enrichment programs, those whose parents didn't have an opportunity to attend college and may not be able to supplement their students' learning at home. Making cuts to academic programs betrays GPS mission's promise to enable all students to reach their potential. It risks widening achievement gaps and ultimately damaging the reputation of our town. We cannot let the legacy of this board be declining academic outcomes. Therefore, I urge you to focus the cuts on non-academic areas. Seek further administrative efficiencies and streamline processes. Explore optimizing schedules for fractional teachers to reduce travel time and maximize instructional time. Ask families who can afford it to contribute financially to offset the substantial cost of after-school sports and other extracurricular activities their children join. Pause the launch of any new initiatives, including extended day programming, until our core academic programs are secure. And while there are clear health and well-being benefits to later high school start times, we must ask if those benefits outweigh the profound harm that cutting essential academics could cause. If this crisis forces a choice, the mission demands we protect academics first. Please protect our students' futures, protect our district's promise, fund academics first. Let the GPS mission, your mission, be your unwavering guide in these difficult decisions. Thank you.
That was perfectly timed. Is John Simone still there? Does he want to speak before we get to our last speaker?
He's still online.
Okay, he's raising his hand.
Me?
Go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thanks very much. I'll keep it brief as I'm dealing with bedtime here, as much like everybody else, I assume. I'd just like to reiterate my support for reopening the conversation around the budget shortfall for the Board of Ed. I think it's a little bit disappointing that we keep having to reopen this conversation, especially since the town has so overwhelmingly made it clear that, the community expects this to get resolved. As the RTM meeting last week, I think was evidence enough. You could see, how many different people across the entire town have voted in support of passing this budget shortfall and really kind of figuring this out and, maybe seeking budget cuts elsewhere. I understand the need for fiscal responsibility, and the BET has a very difficult job, and I respect that and I appreciate it. It just seems that education should always be the absolute last thing on that list. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Julie Freniars. She here?
Good evening, Chairwoman Hirsch, Dr. Jones, members of the Board of Education and the community. My name is Julie Freniars, and I am the Executive Director of the Greenwich Alliance for Education, our town's education foundation. The Alliance is an active member of Greenwich Together. Community members should bookmark the greenwichtogether.org tab on their computers to find very useful mental health and drug and alcohol prevention resources. I look forward to hearing tonight how the results of the recent youth survey are shared with educators at all grade levels and how this information will be used to help our students make safer choices. Tuesday is a big day for AVID. AVID seniors will be celebrating with a lunch, speeches, and recognitions by their teachers Frank Kovac and Ken Alcorn. These teachers have taught their students since freshman year and have seen them grow both in maturity and in academics. They are ready for college. Ken Alcorn started teaching AVID in 2010. This is the last AVID class for him, and he has truly created possibilities for more than 100 students. Thank you, Ken. On Tuesday evening, the AVID class of 2029 will sign contracts with their families and begin their AVID journey. To our schools administrators, thank you for dedicating hundreds of hours to creating a school budget that meets the needs of our very diverse district. We urge the BET to reopen the school budget discussion as supported overwhelmingly by the RTM, the First Selectman, and thousands of petition signers. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
That concludes our public comment. Back to you, Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you. Next up is our superintendent and monthly reports. But beforehand, I just wanted to take just a moment to say I know tonight's discussions are going to be difficult, but before that, I wanted to celebrate at least two exciting things we got to do this week, and just take a moment to congratulate all of the students who were recently honored at the Community Service Awards ceremony. Hearing about each of these individual students was exceptionally inspiring. It was a celebration of their service, compassion, and community spirit. They not only met the needs of their community, but they inspired us all to do more, give more, and be more. And, I know that while there are so many students in our district that give back, that don't always get an award, we recognize you, and we appreciate all the students that step forward to serve and volunteer in our community. And as Principal Ben Savango mentioned earlier, we also got to celebrate the groundbreaking of OGS's renovation and expansion. And I just wanted to say it was lovely seeing all of our students out there in their little hard hats and the biggest smiles you've ever seen and the excitement that was there. And just share with the community that when the work is complete, Old Greenwich School is going to be a beautiful blend of its historic beginnings and a modern student-centered learning environment. It reflects the warmth and strength and excellence of the community that it serves, and it's going to honor its past and fully embrace its future, and give the students the tool space and inspiration that they need to thrive, which I think speaks to all the things that we're going to be discussing later this evening as well. And I know when we get to officer reports, I'm sure a member of our building committee will also speak on the Old Greenwich groundbreaking. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent Jones.
Thank you, Chair Hirsch. I'm just going to add a little bit to what you just said about our volunteer service, community service awards. They were just beautiful, but one of my favorite things is that we actually have Dr. Fleischman, who comes every year and started this award decades ago. And it's just such an honor that he every year comes and does that for us. I also want to echo the Old Greenwich Building Committee, James Waters, just doing terrific work with that entire committee. And Dr. Ben Savango, what a well-organized, wonderful, child-focused event. And I loved how you did all the adult pictures when they went back in. So it was just fantastic. And I also want to say the GHS pool feasibility is well underway. Last week while we were on break, they were still working. They did hold a session this week with coaches, with Pete, our athletic director. I think it was over 2 hours of just taking notes and information, and we'll continue that outreach. So the board, when you see that email, if you want to come and sit with them, you'll have time to also contribute. And last but not least, anyone that is looking for start time information, because some people have asked for that. Some people find board docs difficult to navigate, but if you go on just the regular old website, you click on the Board of Ed, it's right there. And it goes all the way back to 2015, all the documents, agendas for anybody that wants that information. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I now open it up for reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Would you like to start us off?
So I have two reports. Obviously, the Old Greenwich. Let me just add my kudos really to Dr. Benson Vago, James Waters, and the building committee. Something ridiculous like 119 meetings over 2.5 years to get us to that point. It is really an exceptional group of community volunteers leading that effort. Where the Old Greenwich project is going from here, this was the ceremonial groundbreaking. Construction really is starting this summer. Everything is currently out to bid. Bids are expected to close in the next week to 2 weeks, depending on the package. As the board might suspect, this is a rather unique fiscal climate in which to be bidding on things. So we're keep your fingers crossed as everything comes in here. There are some bidders that are more hesitant than others, but we're getting there. And the playground, all things being equal, the new playground will be we ordered the playground this week because we have to move the playground. And the new playground will be up and running come September. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and we'll keep you updated on that. Other report is policy committee. Policy met this week, and the policy committee finalized a draft AI policy after probably about 6 months all told of conversation. So we look forward to bringing to the full board the draft AI policy next meeting. We also have bringing to the board the retirement of the COVID era policy. And at the same time, we started discussions on a new policy to go to an existing regulation around donations, accepting donations and gift caps and all that. So we hope to bring that to you before too long as well. We are on a bi-weekly cadence over the course of the spring to continue to push through different policies and bring them here in a swift and productive manner before the end of the school year.
Thank you. Dr. McCanty Anthony, do you have a question?
Are you, I don't know if it's in order, the rules or whatever, but are you allowed to preview the AI policy at all?
I can email it to you. So the AI policy, yeah. So in general, we are trying to, with all good policies, we are trying not to be too complex and put too many parameters on things because policy is supposed to set guidelines. It's fair to say that the policy, we tried to strike a balance between supporting the innovation and use of AI while also trying to put some safeguards on there around preserving academic honesty and transparency.
Thank you. I know we did have deep discussions and reviewed, policies and discussions from all over the country before we moved forward on this one because it was such a big one for us. Nobody's saying.
We just put it in ChatGPT and pitch that. Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about doing that. Does anybody else have a committee update or liaison update or anything? Well, I know we're going to get the budget committee's update shortly.
I have one.
Central, I think. Wendy?
Hi, I have one for Julian Curtis. Last week during break, THP was able to successfully relocate the water lines and the electrical conduits, which were in the way of the elevator shaft. Also, the corridor wall demolition was completed and steel frames installed in the corridor walls to provide structural support. The area of work was cleaned on Saturday and kids returned to school on Monday. And this week they've been working on some brick infill around the steel frames, and the schedule for the next few weeks is steel and rock excavation. More drilling will take place Saturday with rock removal for Monday. TH plans to work for the next 4 Saturdays, pretty much putting in steel. Yeah, so things are moving along at Julian Curtis.
That's great. Love to hear about all the awesome innovation that's happening. Anyone else have a committee update or anything? Sophie, did you want to, I'm happy to, if you want to share anything about the Havemeyer committee, it's not our committee, but I thought if you want to give like a sentence or two. I just know people have asked, so I figured
I think as people know, there was going to be a request for funding for a consultant that was going to the RTM, but the decision was made to not move forward with that at this time. The committee is going to make a recommendation to the first selectman of the process that we think should be followed. And I think that recommendation will be coming in probably the next 2 weeks is my expectation is being drafted. And then that will, that will open up a much more public process. I know that the first selectman will be releasing all of the proposals that were received by the committee for public review. And I think that there'll be public meetings with an opportunity for public comment.
thank you. Does anybody else have a committee update or no? No. Okay. So then I will move us on to the discussion items. First up is textbook recommendations. Come on down, Mr. D'Amico. Huh?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Jones, and guests. These remarks I'm about to share with you are carefully curated through ChatGPT, so I hope you enjoy them. I'm here tonight to
Thank you for
present.
putting an asterisk on that. That was in our policy.
I'm here tonight to present 3 textbook recommendations on behalf of Lucy Arecco, Sean Hoyt, and Jeffrey Shanker. I extend my sincere gratitude to them and to the dedicated members of their textbook review committees, whose thorough assessments have been instrumental in identifying the recommendations before you. As this is the board's initial review, I'd like to highlight a couple of pertinent details. For AP Physics C and Spanish, our current primary resources have been discontinued, necessitating the adoption of new materials. In the case of AP Psychology, our existing textbook no longer aligns with the College Board's curriculum outline, prompting the need for an updated resource. The rationale for these changes is clear and straightforward. Additionally, feedback from staff, parents, and students has been overwhelmingly positive, with evaluations consistently reflecting the highest levels of approval. Before opening the floor to questions, I want to express my deep appreciation for this board's unyielding commitment to our K-12 curriculum. Over the past 5 years, your support has significantly enhanced the quality of education our students receive. Ms. Arecco, Mr. Hoyt, and Mr. Shanker are available to address any specific inquiries regarding their committee's recommendations. Thank you for your time and continued partnership.
Does anybody have any questions? I had the joy and pleasure of being on the very least one of these textbook committees. I seem to be on all of them, but I could not manage to do all 3, especially since some of them met at the same time. And I will just reiterate and stand behind what Mr. D'Amico said, is that the amount of time, effort, and energy that is put into reviewing every single textbook that we review before students. We have students look at them, teachers that look at them. They are brought into the classroom for, additional students who aren't on the committee to dig around and look at and play with and see what meets the expectations of our teachers, our staff, our parents, and meets the rigors and quality that we look for in textbooks. So, I certainly stand behind the recommendations from even the committees I wasn't sitting on. I know how much goes into that. So, Ms. Costin.
When would these textbooks be purchased?
Well, first we need the board's approval, and then we can start the purchase process.
Do we have, one of my recommendations, well, not recommendations, one of my unfortunate cuts was textbooks.
I'll just simply say if at least 2 of those, if you do cut, if not the third, we probably would have very difficulty in running those classes, 2 of them being APs, because as Mr. D'Amico said, 2 of them, one of which is an AP course, those textbooks have been discontinued, so we wouldn't have a textbook. And the third one for AP Psych no longer aligns. The AP redid their whole program and curriculum for that course.
So the
and
College Board.
Yeah, yes. So it no longer aligns with that curriculum and thus would be very difficult. They've been trying to do their best with what we have, but it is time. So
Yes,
There
it
you
would
go.
certainly present us with a difficult situation.
So this wasn't my original question. I just thought, so when we say, what do we mean when we say a book has been, this seems like an odd question. What do we mean when we say a textbook has been discontinued? Does that mean that an ebook is no longer available online? Or does that
Well,
mean
that-
we can't purchase new hard copies?
What it can mean several different things, but usually what it means is the publisher will reach out and say, we're no longer producing this edition. We're moving towards a new edition.
Yeah. So that was my question, but that was, thanks. So first of all, I really appreciated reading everything in the AP Physics for what it's worth. It was the first time in reading through documents sent to the board that I saw that I've seen specific mention to some of the real science of learning concepts that we talked about, like that was talked a lot about last year at Research Ed and things like that, particularly interleaving and worked examples. And that was great to see. I just wanted to point that out because the first time we saw that cognitive science working in, and I was really excited to see that. My question, and I talked about it earlier, and I don't know how much we really want to get into this tonight, but my question is back to this idea of, in general, when we're talking about hard copy textbooks, and the quote here is for mostly ebooks, and it seems like the research is pretty settled on comprehension is much more easily supported around hard copies than reading online. Is that, and are we, how comfortable we are with, seems like purchasing 50 hard copy textbooks, but much more online books and things like that. And I suspect in Spanish, it's probably because of the nature of the program. But I don't know if that's more of a philosophical thing that we need to get into as a board. If this is another component of the whole screen time debate that maybe we're not paying enough attention to, about how many of these resources are electronic and are maybe not as efficient as they should be, or as they could be if we were really the old-fashioned way. But I don't know how, if anyone wants to speak to that, it's probably a longer conversation.
So I'll speak to the Spanish book. One of the great things about getting the ebook as opposed to the actual text is that the resources are updated. And so teachers can actually print things that are timely. So students aren't carrying around a large book. So students do have the opportunity to read on paper and have contact with a pen and highlighting and all of those good skills that we want them to have without having to look around a textbook.
That's what I was just
I
gonna
think it's
say.
also important to note that the pronunciations, it's helpful to hear the pronunciations in the ebook. Ebooks are much more nimble. So whenever a publisher makes edits or updates, it's instantaneous if we have that platform. I think it is a philosophical debate, probably one we don't want to get into tonight, but would love to talk further about.
I was also going to say, if you've ever seen the size of at least one of those textbooks, and I know because I had a bunch of them in my house, it's a lot for those kids to carry around, and it's very difficult. Like the AP textbook, I think is a good, this thick. And, as was mentioned, the other thing that not only can you print things out, the kids can, especially on some of these, they can print out flashcards for themselves to do test themselves. There's additional support in the ebooks. A lot of them have reteach lessons, or again, if it's Spanish, proper pronunciation. They link them to videos for real world studies and other articles that they wouldn't have access to in a textbook, which also I think makes them very easy. And if I'm not incorrect, we still would have to purchase financially the number of licenses for students that are taking those courses, no matter whether we use them or not. And so it would cost additionally more to purchase that many more textbooks. And I know when we always make sure we have textbooks for students that need them or request them. And again, there are parts and things that can be printed out. And oftentimes the teachers, they do have permission from them, to be able to print a lot of those documents for the students. So they're not lugging around the big textbook, but they're still reading on paper, if I'm not incorrect. But those are things that were discussed in the meetings.
It's over $400,000, if anybody's wondering what the line item is.
Ms. Behet?
Just a very quick. Just a very quick question. With the purchase of the new textbooks, what is the anticipated life cycle of use for the hard copy and these resources to have to reevaluate again in the future, if you can tell it?
Well, all roads lead back to our curriculum management plan. So we have several phases within the plan. You know, we go through a discovery or an internal audit of our resources in one particular phase. And the internal audit is overseen by our content coordinators. What do they look at during an internal audit? They look at the year of the publication. Dr. Jones has stated this in the past. In many cases, we fell well behind in updating some of our textbooks, and we had textbooks that were 20 years old. We've been very aggressive in our approach over the last 5 years to bring textbooks up to a much more relevant and current standard. In some cases, what the coordinator has to look at is alignment. So, for example, with our AP courses, it depends on how often the College Board decides to make changes. We have our Big Ideas platform in math that's in, its third, fourth year of use, and we've already been notified by the publisher that they plan on updating and changing their platform. So when we go through our curriculum review cycle for Big Ideas Math, they've already changed the name of their next publication. I suspect some of that has to do with money making on their behalf. But, in every case, it's somewhat unique. So it's really the responsibility of the content coordinators to look at publication in terms of how long its shelf life could be, adjustments, College Board. And then also the most important driver is academic success. So is the primary resource yielding the academic outcomes that we are hoping for? And so we look at the hard data, we talk to teachers and get feedback, we speak to parents, and we take all of those variables into consideration. And then we embed it in the curriculum management plan as to what's the proper phase for each content area. So that's why when you look at the curriculum management plan, it's so expansive. Yeah.
Cody?
Do the textbook companies tell us years in advance of when they're going to discontinue books?
Not usually. And I'll give you again the example of Big Ideas Math. The agents, the salesmen just told us not today, but recently that they're switching branding from Big Ideas to a new name, and therefore they're not going to support the platform we're currently using. And so when our 5-year license is up, we have a decision to make.
Yeah, and then how do we incorporate that level of uncertainty for the plan? If the thing that drives the new text, because you were saying, no, we have this, all roads lead to the plan, but then the thing that drives the decision making is kind of arbitrary corporate decisions that we don't have visibility into.
Yeah. So when we talk about the curriculum management plan, even though we lay it out for you all for 5 years, what I always say is realistically, you can look at the current year and the year that we're moving into, which is usually our focus based on budget and our data analysis. But further than that, it's really speculation, because we do have that unknown as to whether or not something's going to be discontinued. And then we have to make adjustments to the management plan. And you do see those changes on our plan, and we present that each fall.
Just as a fun side note, I spent probably a year of my life working on Houghton Mifflin as an investment. And from an investor standpoint, they like to brag about their ability to, we just move a little here and there, and then we can go stick everybody with a huge bill and sell them the same curriculum. They don't say it that way, but that's sort of the implication. So I'm sitting here listening to all of this, just thinking about being on the wrong side of that trade.
Aren't you glad they didn't recommend Houghton Mifflin books then?
I thought one of them, Pearson is the physics one, but there's a Houghton Mifflin
Oh, there
further
is.
down.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. But they all do the same thing.
We'd like to add one more point. Come on up.
She was on our committee.
Sure.
Wanted to add something about that.
My name is Margaret Jackins. I teach Spanish at GHS. And to help perhaps put this in a little better perspective, the textbook that I use in Spanish 4 still has VHS and MP3 players in our technology unit. But more important than that, These textbooks date back to 2013, and they have a far more traditional style of instruction intended in them. And right now, it's time for Greenwich Public Schools to catch up with the rest of the language learning world and have product that help us build proficiency in our students rather than simply rote learning. And the textbook that we have chosen is very, very geared toward that. And the best we can do is give our students more tools and opportunities to develop their language learning and all four of their skills on a modern level. Thank you.
Good evening.
Kathleen.
In regards to the AP Physics C books, one of the resources that we looked at was through the company OpenStax, which is free resources for at the college level and at the high school level. And so there is an option to purchase physical copies, which is what we put in the proposal, because we do find value in students reading out of a physical book. But the notion that all the online resources are free to anybody and that we could provide access to high-level resources to any student is what drove us to this. And a lot of the resources that were being used by some of the other companies, especially in AP classes, where these books have to be reviewed or updated every 10 years. The online platforms that they provide aren't really used by our classes, since we utilize AP Classroom so heavily, as they have all the progress monitoring and things like that in there. So a lot of these books for us, at least in science, including AP Physics C, would be a primary resource that students would be able to leverage on the side of AP Classroom.
Sean, don't sit down. So mom of the year here, because I do have a child currently in AP Physics C, and I'm literally sitting here thinking, does he currently have a book?
They do currently have a book, so this is the one that's being discontinued. Yes, and it is an online book. And so every year we have to purchase a new set of these online books for AP Physics C, and it is strictly dependent on the enrollment. And but yes, all students have access to a book.
Okay, so as you can see, I really help a lot, but obviously that enrollment in that class is pretty much doubled, right? I mean, we should all just call out this one teacher is just amazing. And so it's kind of grown this, I think it's probably the highest throughout Fairfield County, the number of students taking AP Physics C, which is pretty remarkable.
And they take both AP Physics C courses in the same year.
It's incredible. And the results that this one teacher I know has shown is pretty amazing. So it's continuing to increase. Is this, first of all, I guess, did he weigh in on this book is my biggest question.
Yeah, both of our AP Physics C teachers weighed in on the book. We had a parent whose child went through the course, and that student also weighed in on the book. So they all agreed that the OpenStax really provided a lot of the derivations that the students would need to be able to go and master the curriculum, and make sure that they were in depth enough and they had enough practice to be able to support the students.
Interestingly enough, it feels like a bang for the buck versus the AP Physics book. Or psychology book, sorry. It seems like.
Yeah, the copies of the book are about $50 in color. And so it's very cost effective. And if we decided we just want to continue with the just online version, that's free.
Yeah, okay, that seems like a good decision. Did I just totally miss, but is there a cost for the Spanish book? I couldn't find it.
The cost is not illustrated in the packet, but it's about $208,000 for a 5-year comprehensive license, which does include some hard copies that are available for students who need them.
Yep. Any other questions? Anyone? Wendy? I don't know if you have your hand up over there. Wendy? Nope.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys for coming and sharing with us these
We'll see you next
three
time
new
for a
textbooks.
vote.
Sounds
Thank you very
good.
much.
So next up on the agenda is Greenwich Together survey results. Is Dr. Heigenthaler here to present, or we're just having Greenwich Together come up?
Good evening. Thank you for having us back to report on the survey results. And thank you very much for your support of the Greenwich Together Youth Survey, which we administer every 2 years. My name is Ellen Brzozowski. I'm the project director for Greenwich Together, and I'll have everyone else introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karina Restrepo. I'm the prevention coordinator for Greenwich Together.
Good evening, Nina Chanana. I work with the Greenwich Together Coalition as the local evaluator.
Hello, my name is Lauren Winston, and I am one of the local school representatives on Greenwich Together. I'm coming from Greenwich Academy.
So we are here. We sent, I hope you all received the slides and the PDF of the full report. So we're here to answer any questions or clarify any things that you might have had in the report or the slides that you'd like to talk about.
Just a quick question, actually, 2 quick questions. Was the survey available in other languages?
Yes, yes.
Only the
I
parent
didn't.
survey.
Oh, go ahead.
Currently, we only have the parent survey available in English and Spanish.
So the students were only able to do it in English.
Yeah, correct.
And then, thank you. And my second question was, I do recall several months back, when the survey was discussed, there was an opt-out option. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do we know how many?
So we are going to have a meeting with all of the school personnel who administered the survey next week. So we'll get a better sense, but we know from Greenwich High School, we did get a sense that there was about 25 that opted out. Do you know, Lauren, from Greenwich Academy?
Fewer than 10.
Fewer than 10.
Does anybody else have any questions? I guess I will say, thank you guys for doing this. I know how much incredible data that we've gotten from learning about a lot of the questions that, the answers over the years from all the students, not just Greenwich Public School, but all the private schools as well. And I know you've utilized use this to create programs for students throughout the town and parents as well. Do you know anything going forward about what programs you guys are looking to put together going forward? And then after that, I also see Ms. Walsh's hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So, we just got this new data, so we're currently kind of where you guys are looking at it for the first time. Hopefully after that, what it helps us do is create a new logic model and really look at our action plan for next year. So we plan to do that now that we have the new data, see if there should be a focus somewhere else with this new data that we just got. If we look at this past year, some things that we did with the data that we already had, which if you looked at the data, it's pretty similar. There was some improvements in the data, but it's pretty similar. So some of the projects that we did, we hosted a Hidden in Plain Sight, which was a project for parents where we had someone come in and basically set up a mock bedroom for parents to do a walkthrough and be able to identify any paraphernalia that you might find in a student's bedroom. After that, they had a discussion with an expert to go through not only how to identify the paraphernalia, but what do you do? How do you have the conversation with your student, with your child, if you find that in their bedroom? So that was great. We also collaborated with the SRO at the high school. SRO Wallace came and gave a presentation of what he's seeing at the high school and current trends. So that's an example. We also continue to do our Hope Day event, which is a collaboration with the Yellow Tulip Project. Every year we plant yellow tulips throughout the community to raise awareness around mental health. we just had our Hope Day event, which is the celebration of the blooming of the tulips. And we have community providers and youth perform. And it's a great way to get youth together, but also to spread awareness about all the great resources that we have in town. And we continue to brainstorm. I could list off some of the events that we've done. I did include some in a slide on the flyer. If you go to our website, there's a whole list of past events that we've done. We're currently working, our youth coalition is working on a social host campaign for prom and graduation season, which our youth came up with a sticker, and we're collaborating with Greenwich Police Department and going to the local liquor stores and putting it on bulk beer, seltzer, anything really that you would purchase for a party, let's say, to inform parents around the social host law and the consequences that would come if you host a party on site and if you allow youth to drink or use marijuana on your property. So those are some examples of what we're currently working on.
Thank you. I think that's really informative, and I know that I've seen some of the stuff you guys have put forward. It's great. Wendy, you had your hand up. Wendy?
I'm
there she is.
fine. I don't need to ask my question now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Does anybody else have any more questions? Cody? And then Sophie?
I heard some feedback that there's some mild frustration over the opt-out form being only in paper or manual. Can you guys make it so that it's a digital opt-out form next year? I think that would be a small but appreciated upgrade.
Yeah, it's actually, we make it up to the school as to how they want to give the opt-out form. Greenwich High School did do it digitally, so it was a Google form that they could fill in. I don't know how.
This is a middle school parent, that's
Okay.
why.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we can have that discussion with the principal around that feedback of
Sure.
that's an option.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
I just want to say I'm really happy that you collected information about technology. And I thought it was really interesting to see that the students are conscious of the fact that they feel like they're spending too much time on screens and that they're proactively trying to limit their time on screens. And I'm sure you're planning things in this regard, but I just think it's really interesting. And I can say as a parent that it's a huge issue in my house.
In everybody's
for the
house.
adults, right? For the adults, the teenagers, the younger kids, everyone. So I'm glad that you're tracking that, and I hope you'll collect more information on that next year. And I also wonder a little bit of how it relates to sleep. And I thought, just Dr. Benzavengo was talking about like the importance of getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and then in your survey, only 50% of the students K through 12 are getting, even like 45% of them are getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and everyone else is getting as little as 4 hours of sleep. So I'm curious, I don't know if you can follow up on that next year, but I'm sure there's a relationship between those two problems.
We do have a question in there about gaming and how gaming impacts sleep. And I think about 1 in 3 said that they were definitely getting less sleep because of gaming. So we could add a similar question about smartphones and even social media. Yeah.
That would be great. Thanks.
Well, you do have that 40% of students report interrupted sleep because of cell phones. So that is there. Yeah, I mean, I think I can't thank you enough. I think what your data is so incredibly important as a community, particularly because now we have this longitudinal track here over and the way you tracked it over multiple years. And quite frankly, I might be alone here, but quite frankly, I think that your results should be creating as much concern as the budget debate. I mean, the reason why, I don't know if the reason why it is because we're a little numb to it because these numbers have been kind of similar for so many years, but still we have 17% of teenagers reporting being consistently depressed. Now that's down from 24 2 years ago, which is terrific. And all the numbers seem to be dropping slightly, but they're only dropping a little bit. But then meanwhile, all of the cell phone data that you added this time continues the point, which is a conversation we had, over the course of the year, of the complete rewiring of childhood to make it completely different than the experience of any adult in this room. I mean, we have half of high schools self-reporting spending 3 hours a day on their phone, 3 hours on social media. That's nuts. But that's half. 11% spend 5 hours. That's 300 kids spending more than 5 hours a day on social media. 40% point reduced sleep. And then 71% of what Sophie was saying, 71% feel more productive when they limit their smartphone use. I mean, so the kids are saying, hey, we want to try to reduce our smartphone use when you ask them that way. But we as a school system stepped back from supporting that in the high school. Instead, we got very strong at the front, and then we decided not to be leaders, and instead gave kids their phones back in high school. And you see across the nation, you see the opposite happening. New York is about to pass a state law banning cell phones, schools K to 12. Many other districts have done that. Dr. Jones tried to do that. This board decided not to. So I really think these results point to how we have to continue to have that conversation and go back to the high school to have those conversations again and see how things are going. Because these numbers are not suggesting that things are normal and okay.
Wendy, I see your hand. Is that back up or
It's
still?
back up. It is, but
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure.
it's
So
not
I'll-
related to
Wendy.
this topic. I just wanted to go back and just say, should students should be able to opt out on their own without parental signature. Is there any way that you could make that happen?
We do.
You do.
They are able to, when the proctor or the person who's administering the survey is talking about it, they do say you don't have to answer these questions if you don't want to.
Great. So it's presented as not mandatory, but
Yes,
optional?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I think just to follow up on that, they're also told that if they do the survey, if there's a couple of questions, they don't have to answer every
They don't
single
have to
question
answer
either, right?
Right.
Right, and they're told they can skip any question at any time and they can drop out at any time and they, some do, some just do great and then they don't do the rest, so.
Okay, great.
Cody?
Thank you.
Oh, wait, sorry, Wendy, do you have another follow-up?
No.
Okay. Cody?
I was just curious if any of you wanted to flag any of the findings that you thought were particularly worth flagging.
I mean, I think in general, the trends, especially around mental health, are finally going in the right direction. I think it was getting we were getting some pretty high numbers after COVID. So it's really, for me, who sees this data, it's such a relief to see that kids are potentially starting to feel better about themselves and how they're feeling, but also that they know who their trusted adults are and they have these connections with not only peers, but other adults in the community, which we're seeing more and more is really what impacts them the most, I think, in being able to overcome challenges in their life. So for me, I always like to look at that.
And I think Greenwich does particularly well in the protective factors, like the trusted adult, feeling safe in their community, feeling safe in school, and that's always nice to see. And on the other side of it, alcohol is still the most used substance. And that's across Fairfield County, it's not just Greenwich. So, we still have some work to do there.
Was there anything that surprised you in the results?
I think it's for me, because it's new data, it's the technology stuff that these young people are they're stuck because they realize that the smartphones and their technology are so a part of their life, but they see that it's also been impacting their life in some negative ways. So how do they balance it? How are they figuring all this out? And I think it's great we have this new data. We can kind of start digging into that a little bit.
Anything? Kathleen?
Quick question. Is it the same survey given to grade 7 as it is to grade 12?
Yes.
I have to admit, that's a little, having a 7th, 9th, and 12th grader, I'm a little bit unsure about that actually. And as I think about it a little bit more, I think some of the questions that were posed to my 12th grader, I'd probably be okay with, and perhaps not with my 7th grader. So I think maybe in the future, we should think about actually doing it a little bit, like grouping it a little bit differently.
Yeah, we're open to that. Just as a reference point, there are 2 pretty prominent national youth surveys that have been used here in this community in the past, and they are developed to be given the same survey to be given to 7th to 12th graders. So that's sort of the standard in this, but we could certainly always discuss changes.
I was just gonna say, I know we talked about, like, the first year that you guys did this, I wasn't on the board yet, but we talked about that at PTA Council, and having that same discussion, that some of those questions were really seemed forward for some of the younger students. And I think, you guys had ultimately gone ahead and given that same survey to the younger students as well as the older. And the fact that some of the results from the younger students were the things that shocked us the most, is that that those students were aware and using substances or trying things out earlier than we would have expected. So I thought that data was really fascinating. And I don't know, I mean, maybe now it seems like it's old hat, but I mean, I totally get your point. So I was going to say, that's just showing the opposite side of it. It was just kind of an interesting fact from the first year, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I definitely have some of her friends' parents, my 7th graders, that reached out and were
Yeah.
uncomfortable with some of the questions, and
Oh, no, I get it. I just
Yeah.
said, I thought at least that was interesting.
Yeah.
Cody looks like he's got something.
I mean,
to
this
say.
is just worth sharing. One of my, a parent that I know texted me and said, my daughter was asked, she's 12, if she had ever had 6 drinks in an hour. She's like, not thrilled about that. So I do think there's some validity to saying seniors are different than 7th graders.
I'm not sure I've ever had 6 drinks in an hour either, but
What are you doing after this?
Challenge accepted. Okay.
Oh, no.
I'm
no.
teasing.
We're modeling for our children, right?
He didn't say what kind of drink. It's,
Okay, all right.
I'm supposed to have 8 ounces, how many ounces?
Lattes.
64 ounces of water? I'm short on my water consumption. Like,
Tony, are there, can you, I don't know if you could talk about how, like, we use this data internally, because there's so many nuggets here. I mean, it's interesting, like one thing, like only half of all teenagers report doing community service, which is so interesting since we have the community service awards and the fair that the student government had, but different things. So like examples of nuggets like that. So, like how does district staff use this data to guide our work? Or is there more we might be able to do here?
I think there's probably more that we could do with it. One of the questions that I'd ask, and I know it's not possible, I wanted our data disaggregated.
Yeah.
Because I find it very difficult to have the whole town data. And I really want to know what's going on in Greenwich, in public schools. So that part has been a little challenging. I agree with what you're saying on the 7th grade survey as well. It's a little bit mature for some of our 7th graders, or I should really say most of our 7th graders in certain questions. But I think there's some great data. And, I'm not sure our numbers are always as high as they could be. And I think part of that is the way that we also have students, when they take it, how you push the survey out, where when you look at like our end of the year survey for students, for parents, we're very strategic about how we push them out, where it's done in a particular class or where we get a higher participation rate. So I think that's an area too that we need to look at a little bit more. Not having it in Spanish, for instance, we're missing a whole demographic of students when we have the diversity that we do, in Greenwich public schools.
any other questions? Wendy, just checking. No? Well, thank you guys. And I welcome, once you guys have had the time to go through your data, and if you have any, things that you want to share back with us, we'd love to hear it. I think
Sure.
it's fascinating.
And we will be doing some focus groups with parents and children, so we'll get some qualitative data too to sort of build on the survey results. And May 12th, I think it's a Monday, right? We're having a community-wide meeting around these survey results. So you're more than welcome to come to Town Hall, 9 a.m. that day, if anyone's available, we'll hopefully tape it as well. But, just spread the word so that people in the community can get access also. And it'll be on our website, of course, as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And thank you for sharing that it's going to be presented then too.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Anyway, next up is the field use study. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Jones, and I don't know if there's anything to be put up, but if any of the board members need to move. if
Yes,
there's-
I'm going to invite Pete Giorgio, our athletic director. We only have 5, 6 slides, not a whole lot, but this was a request of one of our board members, and just going to talk about how our fields are scheduled from the school perspective.
Hello. So Dr. Jones asked me to put a couple of slides together, and I shared the weekly schedule, how I share it with the town and the coaches, and I'm here to answer any questions you guys may or may not have.
Well, do you want to go through the slides? Because we've not seen them.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were seeing them. So I don't
Yeah.
have control over it, so I think Mike's doing it. Mike, if you want to go to the next one, that's fine. So this one right here is going over ownership, maintenance, and usage of the slides. We have all fields at the high school and the middle school, elementary schools are Board of Ed fields. We own them. Parks and Recs maintains them for us. And they're primarily there to serve the Board of Educational, specifically school sports and after-school activities. So that was the first slide we had up there. The second slide is going over the collaboration between Board of Ed, myself, and people at Parks and Rec, and how we happen to serve the needs of the Board of Education as well as the needs of the community. So that stuff is up there, and I could definitely share this with you guys afterwards too as well. So we're trying to maximize the use of it for our sports programs, not just the high school, and if we need to use it for our middle schools and stuff as well. Because we've been hosting a lot of the middle school challenges up at the high school, give them an area to come at. This winter. We had our championship basketball games that the young lady spoken earlier, and it was a great environment to be in, and it just gives those kids an opportunity to see where they're going. And in our minds, it keeps retention through the public school system. And the next one, Mike, if you don't mind, this is our weekly schedule. So the idea of the schedule is, so we have one main document where facilities, parks and recs, and our coaches know where everything is. Very recently, we switched this, which used to be a public-facing document, to just internal, because we wanted not to have too much information out for the public to let us know where our children are when they're least supervised at practices. We prioritize the high school sport programs, the Parks and Rec, and Don Moore there and myself work really well together to make sure that the needs of the Board of Education schools are met first. And then we try to get that into a big cluster. And then Don goes ahead and does their thing to make sure that all the community gets usage of our fields too as well. I'm trying to see from here if we have anything else on there. I think we're good. That last bullet point just lets you know how we work together. A perfect example is last year we had a pivot from Greenwich High School to Havemeyer Field, and it was a grass field, so we didn't have to pay for any of that for the usage of it. But obviously, to get it ready, we did. Dr. Jones at that point, Blaze and myself and Ralph found ways to make that happen for him, which was a great experience. We do, however, pay for the use of the one turf field that we don't own, which is Koskob. And there's a couple other stuff under for obviously the rink and the golf course. And our restrictions are up there too as well. We've talked about it before. There's a process that we follow for the lighting at the stadium. We also have restrictions with the PAC and other activities going on. Me and Karen Foster work really close together to make sure we're not trying to book too many big activities to alleviate parking and stuff at the high school. We've been doing really well lately, so we haven't had any, knock on wood, any big issues with that. Mike, next slide, please. So this is like the scheduling priorities. So what we've done in the past few years is we try to schedule all freshmen to go out to practices first. Some of our difficulties with this is our daylight savings for the fall and for the spring. End of the fall is a challenge. It helped a lot this year with the removal of flex and getting the kids out there earlier to get kids more time to get them home. So that's been really great. We try to prioritize, like I said, underclassmen first, freshmen, JV, then varsity, allows those freshmen to get practice done and then get home for their studies and their dinner and get some rest that they need. We also did something new this year with the study hall. We haven't offered all year long. It's a monitored room. There's not really tutoring going on there, but there's a certified teacher or someone in the building to give the kids a place to go to study. It helps the athletes who need to go someplace before practice. It also helps the rest of the students by having a place to go and study quietly when they're waiting for the late bus or if they get out of the club early. So that's been working really well for us, as well as some other intramurals. And Mike, next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have them. Mike, do you want to go back to the restrictions page? Right.
Honestly, this is why I asked for report, because I didn't quite understand this. So what does that mean? Other school activities, like when there's a college fair and things that we're limited.
So it's not that we're limited per se, like what we could do, but it's more like if we have a college fair and we're expecting a lot of people coming into the school, it's hard for the parking to have, let's say, for instance, a huge event. So if we're going to have a homecoming game for football, which draws a lot of people, we'll try not to schedule it the same day. But working with Karen and myself, knowing how many people come to the events, we're like, okay, this could happen together. I'll give you a perfect example. We wouldn't have a huge college fair or a huge performance in the pack if we're going to host regionals for swimming, because we have 16 schools visiting there. So it becomes a problem with parking. Where if we were going to have, let's say, a baseball game or something that might not draw as many people from outside, and we'll only have 2 schools involved versus 16, it's a little bit more manageable.
And then what are the PAC restrictions? PAC is the
Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
So there is, I'm a little familiar with this, but there is something in when they built the PAC that we need to consider having 2 big events going on for the same reason. You're going to have a huge performance in the PAC. We must be drawing a lot of people coming to it. Again, you wouldn't schedule that with a football game, especially if it's like a rival game. Us against Staples on Thanksgiving and something in the PAC would not, the parking lot would not accommodate having 2 big activities going on. We could have activities. It's just we have to work around the big ones. You know, we couldn't have 2 major activities going on.
And if I might add, there is an agreement.
Yes.
There's a formal written agreement.
You know what the
It's basically, it's kind of loose, but it is when it was built, and it is about having a major event in the PAC at the same time you're having any other major event on the campus. And we're not supposed to do that. And I can send that to the board and follow up.
And that's where me and Karen work together, because she knows roughly what the events in the PAC will draw in and, you know, what our sporting events would draw in. So that's how we work collaboratively to make sure that we try to avoid that.
So, and then how do we have 10 games under the lights? How do we divide that up?
We divide it very equitably. We get a schedule for our sports. Every team that plays at the stadium is guaranteed 1 night game, right, throughout the whole year. And then when it comes to the lighting, we just follow we follow that procedure that we've agreed to the agreement for it. And we use it when needed, especially for the practices. We usually use the practices more in the fall.
How popular are they?
Depending on the game. Yeah, depending on the game and the rival.
Do you see an interest in more night games or?
I could do some research to make sure. I'm sure that, a couple of them would like more night games. But at this point right now, that not being an option following the agreement, I just stick to what we have and try to make sure everyone has an equitable piece to that and they'll have opportunity to play at night who's plays at the stadium.
I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I was just going to point out, I don't remember, I was trying to just, while we were talking, look up, but there was a task force with the town, and Kathleen was the Board of Ed liaison to that at the time, talking about field usage throughout town, when we were trying to figure out how many fields we had available and which ones were grass and turf. And I think this was right before, at some point in the Western field discussions about doing turf and whatnot. Yes, right before COVID. And I distinctly remember that also showing that specifically, there was no downtime on basically almost any field in town. All of them were always overbooked, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff. I was looking to find it, but I don't know if you had access to that survey, or if you knew, not survey, but the report that they did, if you looked at that. I don't know if Kathleen remembers much from that. I just, time, anything before, BC, before COVID. Well,
Uh-huh. No, I blame Ralph, as you might recall, from putting me on that committee. And so he and Joe Siciliano were also very involved in it. It was, that was pretty much the conclusion, is that we needed more money to invest in more fields, and I'm pretty sure we didn't get it. So, and there was lots of debate about turf, and then that didn't really come to fruition. And so I mean, I'm sorry to sound so negative, but I'm not sure that there's been much improvement on that front.
Western is beautiful.
Western is, and actually, I have to say, my seventh grader, who, after having that survey, was able to go over at Western, did note that the Western fields were amazing. So that is good. While I have you, how is the baseball situation?
Baseball is a work in progress. It is, in my opinion, much better. We're waiting for as far as I'm told, we're waiting for the field to actually settle. We just had a great win there the other day for youth night. And then afterwards, some of the kids got to come up and share some time with the varsity athletes, which was great. Facilities did an amazing job. We were able to get the dugouts painted, washed, repaired, so that looks really well out there right now. Parks and Rec is out there, I think, daily trying to get the fields ready for us as well. We're still working on some other things that we're trying to move forward with, but all well, we just did a good repair on the scoreboard, converted it over from solar to power, which has been working really well. So, facilities and stuff is really working forward to try to give those kids a great experience. Unfortunately, we can't control the weather.
No, but I'm really happy that you did that, because I know it was a lot for the baseball team. So thank you.
They did a great job last year pivoting to Havemeyer. The kids loved it. I got phone calls about that after the season, how great it was. Not just from our parents, but people in the community reached out saying it was nice to catch a game in the middle of the day, down off of Greenwich Ave. So we're working towards that. We're listening to our boosters and trying to figure out what we can and cannot do for that baseball field.
Sophie?
Just getting back to the lights in the football stadium. I know a lot of other towns have lights at their schools and are able to use them in the evenings on a regular basis. And I think it's not just a use for the school teams, but also for the community. So I'm sure if we didn't have those restrictions, I imagine that there would be plenty of use and perhaps rental income from that field. I don't know if that's kind of part of your question, but yeah.
Yeah, if you drive by the high school, those fields, when we're there, they're definitely used, and we're fighting for space. So if you were to offer me 3 or 4 more fields, we could definitely use them during the day. It's just that we don't want to practice into the odd hours of the night, to give those kids opportunity to go home.
Cody?
Do you know if the written agreement we have with the awful person that made us do that, does it stipulate what the penalties are for breaking the 10 light agreement?
Well, I was gonna say, I have the agreement. I'm happy to send that to you later, and you can look that over. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly, a discussion to be had on another day, but happy to send it over to you, or Dr. Jones can as well.
Yeah, the area that I'm interested in is exploring. It obviously is so crazy that there's all this opportunity cost of not being able to use this amazing facility because of some silly arrangement with one
It was
person.
It was a legal agreement.
Yeah,
and that
no,
was-
understood.
It went through the courts and
But the-
it's very, yeah.
As we've experienced in our own court stuff with the BOE, sometimes you can, get tangled up in court things and the cost of it isn't so bad. So it might be worth looking at what the cost of violating the agreement is and then exploring that because it may be a cost worth incurring. So just, I look forward to looking at the agreement.
I appreciate your thoughts, but I don't want to talk about, it may have a discussion about like purposefully planning to do something that would, be against that agreement. I mean, from years and years ago prior to us, but I'm
I
happy to
think we
share.
should ask the kids if they want more night games personally, because we are the only high school I know of that doesn't have Friday night lights.
We have them, just not every Friday.
I know, and I think, and I think that's outrageous, particularly in this time of, of all these other restrictions that we have. I think it's completely outrageous. And I think we should say so publicly.
We should have more.
And I think we shouldn't be afraid to say so as a board, because our kids are being hurt by this ridiculous agreement from 20 years ago. We have a brand new facility, and it is completely ridiculous that we limit ourselves to 10 games a year for both our boys and girls sports teams. And I challenge anybody to tell me that's not ridiculous.
Does anybody have any other questions about field usage? No? Thank you for looking into a bunch of these things, and
Thank you.
if I can find this, the information from from the back in the day of the field survey, I'm happy to send that stuff.
Would love to see it.
the
Thank you.
town.
Try to find it.
Yeah. Yes, anywho, so next up on our list is the agenda plan, but I know it got posted really late, so I'm not sure if everybody,
I was going to speak to that. I think we can just very, very quickly, let me point out a couple of things and then let's move on and we'll get it on the next agenda when you have time to review it. But when you're looking at it, I tried to put a couple of items in yellow. We will be in GEA contract negotiations this summer. So this date that's on here mirrors where we were last year with GOSA. It may or may not be that exact date, but it just lets you know what the timeline is. Then you'll notice the GHS pool feasibility is on here. It's listed several times just in case we need it several times. It's a huge project. So that's why that's on there. About the third page over, there is a retreat where you'll notice the K-12 STEM report and the ELA report is there. I put it in yellow because we were considering doing your presentations like in the first hour and then going into executive session for that meeting so that we can get those two updates that we're supposed to have annually. And as you know, we have not had them this year. But I think if we leave it at that and give you time to read through it, send me any comments that you have. And if I need to do a new draft for the next meeting, I can do that.
Did anybody have a chance to review it? I mean, I know I had looked it over, but I'm happy to move it to the next agenda since this was just a discussion item. So I do welcome or, suggest that board members get a chance to review it. And if you have any thoughts or questions ahead of putting it on their next agenda, to share those with me and Dr. Jones. That way we can make sure we get a lot of those questions and concerns answered in advance. Next up, are Mr. Brandon, Mr. Lai in regards to our monthly financial report and then following that budget transfers.
I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to talk about the next two items. Patrick, you're muted.
Yep. All right. So, okay, you hear me okay now? Good. So, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Karen. So, on the financial, we finished March. Right now, 3 quarters into the years, there are 3 more months to go until the end of June in finishing the years. The year-to-date spending is in line with the history. We are continuing to keep a close eye on the transportation, special education, and food service financial. As of now, we currently see that we are on track to finish the next 3 months within the full year budget. So we'll be just like this and then see if there's any questions.
Any questions? Bueller, anyone? No? Okay. Then we can move on to budget transfers.
On the budget transfer, is only one items in here. It is kind of like the budget, the temporary salary line is a transfer between programs. It is just a budget corrections to kind of like put the right budget into the right program where it is needed for the temporary salary. So it is within the same major object code, but it is just between different programs within the student activities departments.
Anyone else? Anyone have questions on this before we move to the big item of budget? Small budget, big budget coming. Okay. So then I will move to the next item. It's listed as an action item, and I sent an email just to the board, and I'll just repeat it here, saying that being that this is the first opportunity for the board to have a public discussion on some of the discussion, recommendations that the budget committee had sort of gone through. My guess is that we will not be voting on anything tonight because we really haven't even had one discussion on it yet. And I had sent an email asking, and I'm going to again share this so that, for the board to be able to get together this coming Tuesday evening in order to possibly vote, because we want to make sure we get that before teacher contracts have to go out for next year and before the RTM is starting their discussions and meetings, although, I guess what we're looking at may not be, that change their discussion. But, and with that, I'm going to just hand this over to Dr. Jones.
Thank you. The first thing that I want to say is that anything that we're really putting on the table and in the discussion that we're having tonight is coming from our collective community. We have suggestions from GEA, suggestion from GOSA, from PTA, from our community at large, from the Board of Ed. And so these items that we wanted input from you tonight are specifically because they're more, I would say, operational in nature. And we would like to get a consensus of like what the board's thinking is. And those three items that we want to really focus on tonight are the transportation scenarios, the advanced learning program, and high school athletics. And I already had somebody say to me, what about middle school athletics? So we're prepared to talk about that if you in fact want to.
So in order for us to actually have a discussion, I need to put the item on the table as it's an action item, unless I'd like to actually move, instead of making an action item, I'd like to move that we table the vote until Tuesday, as opposed to making an action item to approve. Anybody else want to second that motion? Sophie? So all in favor of at least tabling the discussion, and any action on these discussion items on the budget reductions till next Tuesday, or this coming Tuesday, I should say. All in favor, can they raise their hand? Okay, 8-0. Okay, thank you. So we're discussing, my motion was to table the action because this is our first. I want to make sure that anything we're discussing here, the public has an opportunity to opine and reach out to us on, as some of the discussion items may, not be, people didn't watch our budget meeting, and some of these may not have come up during that discussion with the budget committee. So I just want to make sure it's open and transparent. Back to you, Dr. Jones.
Sure.
Yep.
We have this in front of us, and I see it's up there. Can we post it for docs?
Yes, it will be tonight after the meeting. We were still working, and you'll see that, especially on the transportation one. We're literally today, we're still working. I'm going to start and kick it over to Ben for the overview of the adjustment. And I think this is just really good for anybody in the public that's watching the budget to understand what the number is and how we got, to this situation. So Ben, if you can just walk us through the numbers again.
Yeah, Mike, can you advance the next slide? This is the same slide we saw at the April 9th Budget Committee meeting, and just want to hone in on line 9. That's the adjustment we're working towards. So the budget gap we have is the $4,587,962. And that is different from the BET adjustment, which is line 5, which is the $4,048,621. And again, that's because line 7 and line 8, we need to add. And so in order to have a balanced budget beginning July 1 of 2025, we need to find 4,587,962 of budget adjustments. But the exact same slide you saw on April 9th, and happy to answer any clarifying questions you may have on this slide.
Oh, I have a quick question, and I know Sophie does after as well. Did we, just out of curiosity, the need for the extra pre-K class section in September 2025, was that in the original budget? I mean, I'm just double checking. I don't remember that section being in. So if that wasn't accounted for, isn't that something that we could then ask for as an interim, as opposed to having to reduce now even further? And again, the transfer of funds from BOE to Town Greenwich?
Ben, feel free to talk. I mean, we could go for an interim, but we need it in September. And as you know, up to this point, any of the kind of accounts that we used to have for additional staff, we used to have a line item that was about $200,000, and that was cut out. Like, we don't have any, I'm going to say contingency. That's not necessarily the word, but we don't have any. And we know we need this in September. So we're trying to solve the problem now versus waiting and going for an interim and starting in the red.
Sophie?
I guess my question is very closely related to that, which is, if we think that we're going to have larger kindergarten class next year, which we didn't know at the time when we created the budget back in October, are we looking at potentially like a couple extra sections there?
So kindergarten is very different because we watch kindergarten now all the way through the summer. So I would not be ready to say that we couldn't, for instance, move a teacher on 3rd grade where numbers are lower into kindergarten. Pre-K, because we know the students that are by age are staying back because they're 3, 4, and then some of them will turn 5. And then we know where we are right now on students who are qualifying between now. We know where we are. And so and we're already over this current year. So we know that we have to have that class.
No, I'm not questioning that
Yeah.
that you need the pre-K class. I'm just wondering, we're tracking that sort of larger than expected kindergarten class, but it's still too soon to say.
It is still, because people unfortunately don't always get their enrollments papers in. Like, somebody may have signed up, but they just haven't finished yet. And we watch it literally all summer long.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions on slide 2? Overview of the adjustments.
I think we can move to the next slide if you're ready on the transportation, and I will turn it over to Ben, but I do want to say scenario 4 is exactly what several of you were asking about, and it's looking at changing a start time at the elementary level and leaving the secondary. And just a credit to Kayla Coker, who coordinates all of our transportation. She worked nonstop on this because it was community input since our last meeting. So Ben, do you want to walk them through the scenarios again?
Just orient you on this slide. There's the 5 scenarios. We'll go into those quickly. Just the way we try to show this slide as well is if you go to left to right, the farther the scenario is to the right, or the plus sign, it's more significant savings. However, the higher it is up in the page, it increases the schedule disruption. So we just wanted to show it both from a numbers perspective, but also just sort of the quadrant perspective of the further up and right you go, the more disruption and savings, but there's essentially a correlation between budget savings and schedule disruption. I think we've spoken to 1, 2, 3, and 5 at the last meeting, but just very quickly, scenario 1 shows the current, for middle school, the current start time, 8 a.m. to 2:45. If you adjust that by 20 minutes earlier, you're able to have 1 bus reduction, which is 108,769. And so each one of those tables is set up similar to both the current and the proposed time. And just moving up to scenario 2, doing the exact same thing with the middle schools. But if you add Parkway School from the current 8:45 start time to 9 a.m. start time, again, 15 minutes, you were able to reduce our current fleet by 5 buses, and that becomes the 543 and change. Then moving up to scenario 3, you're still doing the middle schools, but in addition to Parkway, you're adding ISD, Glenville, Coscob, and Riverside. You're able to get to 8 buses, and that gets you to the 870 and change. As again, the scenario 5 is what we talked about at the April 9th meeting. That's adjusting the school start time for the high school, which is currently 8:30. Going back to the original time before the adjustment, going back to 7:30. And you make some minor adjustments at the middle school by 5 minutes. Ham Ave, Julian Curtis, New Leb by 15 minutes, 10 minutes at most of the elementary schools, and then 15 minutes at Parkway. That gives you the largest budget savings at 23 buses, which is 2.5 million budget savings. And then, as Dr. Jones mentioned, scenario 4, as based on the feedback from the the April 9th meeting, we tried to keep the secondary schools no change. So there's no change in their schedule, but you're moving the elementary schools, Ham Ave, Julian Curtis, New Leb, you're moving them from a current start time of 8:15 to a new start time of 7:30 a.m. And all the balance of the elementary schools go from 8:45 to 7:45 a.m. That adjustment allows you to do 12 buses reduced, which is the 1.3 million and change.
And I don't know if anybody else has a question, but the one question I had was, I know I've heard and I had a lot of parents reach out and the elementary saying that it might be beneficial to, leave the high school later and move the elementary schools earlier. And I don't know if you guys worked through any of those, the possibility of that.
That's 4.
That's 4?
That is 4.
No, that's not. Oh, they are. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong number there. Yes, never mind, just kidding. Cody?
I think the Tony, Ben, and Patrick have done a really great job working on building out which is still in progress, which is why we will address it next week, but building out a potential budget in line with the BET guidelines. I think this particular issue is probably the single most important one to have a view from the board on, because it is the largest dollar impact. And so it would, I think, be very helpful for getting to a finalized budget if we had a sense from everyone on how folks felt about this. Recognizing that it's kind of, you're just choosing between, bad choices, and everything has an opportunity cost. But understanding where people are on this particular one, I think is probably the single most impactful thing for advancing the rest of the budget work.
On that note, I would just like to add, as an aside, I wasn't on the board when this change was made. I know Kathleen was. Oh, you weren't? This was before you as well? Okay. Just kidding then. But I was sitting in the audience through all of this and, heading things up with PTAC. So, and I was on a ton of the committees to study this. And I know one of the decisions, just to put this forward, that we had ahead of us at that point was thinking that we were going to make this change. We were going to be leaders in the pack, and that a lot of the other districts were reaching out to us and looking to do this and make this change. And as of now, I think there may only be 1 or 2 other districts that have made the change and have kept with it. I know some were looking into it and never did it. Some were looking into doing it, did it, and then reversed it already. We're the ones that have stuck with it. I know that the state, they've been talking about it, the state trying to make a mandatory start time in line with what we've done. It's come back and forth a few times. They quite literally just discussed at the very start of April, and it failed to have any forward move. The state was looking to do even just do studies to do it, and almost every district had reached out to them, begging them not to do it. Financially, it is almost impossible to do for a lot of communities, especially with the budget cuts that we're seeing. And additionally, and I'm sure you all know, transportation costs are rising because we just don't have enough in the state, as many school buses and school bus drivers, and you need more when they change the school start time. So we may be one of the only districts, I think, that still has switched the start times to this. And I don't know if that just comes into play for anybody, but I did want you guys to be aware, because it is something they've been discussing at the state. And even there, they cannot seem to make forward movement at this time to just even do a study on it. And Dr. Jones, I think, could speak on that.
And they are looking at it at the state, and I think right now it is on hold for that very reason. It's just so expensive. I will say I went and looked at the start times today. Fairfield 7:30, Darien is 7:40, New Canaan is 8 o'clock. Westport is 8 o'clock. They used to be earlier. They did change to 8. Stanford 7:25, Weston 7:45, Wilton is 8:20. So the one that is kind of the closest to us is probably Wilton. And then they have grades 3, 4, and 5 also going at 7:40.
Say again, so which ones of those are are at 7:30?
You're talking about for high school?
Yeah.
For high school, Fairfield is 7:30, Darien is 7:40. Stanford is 7:25, Weston is 7:45, and then we have a couple that are 8 o'clock. New Canaan and Westport are 8 o'clock. And I know we discussed that at one point whenever the big discussion was happening. And then Wilton is 8:20.
Was it Ridgefield that changed it and then changed it back almost immediately? Oh, that was Norwalk? That's what I said, I can't remember because so many districts had called us to ask how it was working and what unintended consequences we had and positives and negatives and so forth at the time.
So it sounds like that would make us, if we did option scenario 5, the second earliest on that list, right? Other than Stanford at 7:25.
Fairfield 7:30.
Okay, same as Fairfield.
Yep. And you'll find, I mean, Fairfield probably deals with a lot of the same issues. They have 11 elementaries, 3 middle. They do have 2 high schools. So they tend to mirror us a lot, you know, when we're comparing to other districts for physical size. The other thing is most of the elementaries are 8:10, 9 o'clock. They've pushed the other direction where our scenario, in order to get, you know, cost savings and an effective schedule, we're pushing earlier, which is more like Wilton. And Wilton is at 7:40, like for grades 3, 4, and 5.
Question.
Yes? Sorry, Wendy, I didn't see your hand up.
Oh, no, that's okay. So are we would we be able to move the time to 7:40 instead of 7:30? Do we have any flexibility with the timing of the start time? Does it have to be 7:30 at the high school?
Ben, you can probably chime in.
No, absolutely. Off the top of my head, as we sort of, you can do a lot of different scenarios. As I was talking with Kayla about this, it would likely reduce some of the savings simply because of you really trying to be as efficient as you can with the 3-tier model of the schools. Even the 5-10 minutes really does have an impact, is the ability to clear the students and do the next pickup. We can look at the 7:40, but my initial reaction is you won't see the 23 bus or the 2.5. That savings will go down due to the 10 minutes if you're going to keep everything else the same.
Okay, I'm just thinking, wouldn't you have to change everything else by 10 minutes, I guess, or it doesn't work that way?
Oh, yeah, if you wanted to change everyone 10 minutes, then you likely could keep the same. But if you were just trying to solve for the high school and keep middle school and elementary schools as proposed, then that would be you would likely chew into your savings. But if you just did 10 minutes across for everybody, for example, looking at scenario 5, as proposed as Parkway 9 a.m., that would move to 9:10. The 8:55 elementary schools would be to 9:05, and we can do the math for the other ones. If you did that across the board, you would save your same savings. But if you start tweaking just one school or one segment, you're going to have an impact.
No, I meant all of them, because I think for the savings, it would have to affect all of them.
Understood.
Thank you. And great job, you guys. I can tell you did so much work on this and not in a very short period of time. So thank you.
I might just add, having lived through start time before where we shifted even just 15 minutes, when you start getting after 9 o'clock for elementary, it's a big deal to parents. So I'm sure we would hear going in that direction. I did have Mr. D'Amico just touch base with Title I schools, which would be our earliest ones in that scenario 4, because I thought, did they see a big concern? Is there something we might not think about? And they actually felt good about it because a lot of kids need like before school care anyway. So it may mean that they would just go straight to school. We would have to adjust at the end of the day, the aftercare, work with Boys and Girls Club, you know, those sorts of programs.
Right. We already have those in place already. So I mean, I think we have plenty of after school care, right? It's the morning. And I do think there are a lot of people that have their children brought to school by other people because they have to go to work.
You have that, but when you're working like with Boys and Girls Club, you have to remember we have high school students that actually work their program. So now if it's an hour earlier at the end of the day, you need to be able to get their workers to Boys and Girls Club before our kids get there. So that's just a bigger issue. We just need to do a lot more follow-up just to make sure we were very thorough no matter what scenario we're looking at.
Understood. Thank you.
But I do know that Cody, well, Sophie had her hand up, but I also know Cody had asked us to sort of take a straw poll, so to speak, on our thoughts on this, but Sophie.
Yeah, I guess,
do
well,
you have a
just
question?
going back to the elementary thing, I agree. I think when you push it later, I can see that would be very difficult for working parents. And really is also pushing a new cost on them because you have to pay for the before school. I know, at least, so it's not free if you're dropping your kid off at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's like a new cost that you're taking on if school doesn't start until 9. So probably the earlier start time, if we're doing a straw poll, like I think pushing elementary earlier probably makes more sense. Also, I'm mindful of like if you have a kindergartner and they're 5 and they get home by 4 o'clock, they're kind of rolling straight into dinner and going to bed. Like it's hard to push their day that late. So that's kind of my thought on that. I'm like the other options better. In terms of high school, I did a little quick math and I'm very mindful of the survey that we talked about earlier today about people not getting enough sleep. And I've had a bunch of high schoolers myself and they don't get enough sleep. And I actually had someone who was in the high school and did 2 years at one time and 2 years at the next. So I feel like you are losing an hour a night basically when you move the start time earlier. And, when you look at that over the course of 4 years, roughly that means that you lose 98-hour nights of sleep in 4 years. That's what we're talking about because it's like 1 hour a night over the course of a school year. Someone can check my math if they want, times 4 years, divide it by 8, and it's 90 nights of lost sleep.
But you said
And
if you move it earlier, you lose an hour at night? That's what I'm just.
Yeah, like I'm saying, if school start time is at 7:30 instead of 8:30, and most students are not going to go to bed an hour earlier because I just don't think they will. That's my experience, right? And then you play that out over the course of 4 complete school years, like there is this really significant cumulative effect. And I think it's hard to measure what does that mean academically? What does that mean in terms of your mental health? What does that mean in terms of your physical health? But it is 90 full nights of sleep that you lose over those 4 years when kids are still growing, a lot. Like these are big, important years physiologically and mentally. And so I really have concerns about it. I appreciate that it was an expensive decision that we made to move the start time. And I understand we're in a kind of horrible, impossible situation of having to cut our budget now in a way that we didn't want to. But I think it would be a shame. And I think if we do it, we really have to be conscious of like, that's what we're doing to our kids. That's the number of nights of sleep that they miss over the course of high school as a result. And that's 3 months of not sleeping. That's a lot of not sleeping.
Kathleen?
Yeah, Cody, did you want to go or no?
Sure, I was just going to add, I think for anyone that doesn't have a strong opinion either way, if we do a straw poll or whatever, you could definitely be indifferent. But one helpful way to think about it is we're going to talk about the athletics next, is to weigh it against an alternative. So I don't want to, off the top of my head, I believe it was about 500. What was the number for doing 20% of the athletics? 455. So just to put it in perspective, if we said that we were going to have students, it was a 220 per student per sport. So one thing that we contemplated, and I'm sure that this will be widely loved by everyone, is if we had a program where to do a high school sport, you'd have a $220 extra cost per student. We'd have some kind of way to address it for students that were, sorry to take us so far afield here, but this relates to the bus thing. So you'd have, if you said we're going to have 20, have students pay for 1/5 of the sports budget. So it's still basically very heavily subsidized by the school, but you haven't paid for 1/5 of it. And then you evenly distribute that across sports. So that ends up being $220 per student per sport. And that's about, just short of $500,000. So when you think about like, okay, is it worth it to have an incremental cost of 1.2 million for the later time? You can think of that as like, okay, well, I could half cover that with the sports thing and then presume there's something else like that. There's other things that are being worked on. These are just the ones that, these were, enough to talk about today. I just wanted to recommend that as something to think about.
So since you were talking about pay to play, I'm just going to toss this out there because we haven't started talking about it yet, but
Can I stay on transportation? Because I haven't
Oh, yeah.
spoken about it. Okay.
Yeah, no. I was just
Yeah.
going to use it as a subtle.
Because it is the elephant in the room. And so, I've been on the board now, oh my gosh, 8 years, and this predates me. So that I know some people think it was like yesterday. It's not, right? That's nearly a decade in the making. So people have adjusted their lives, their work schedules, their parenting style, their everything to it. So I don't take this decision lightly, I think is what's really important to note. I also appreciate that Laura Erickson came out here tonight because she was a part of that board that made that decision. I don't know, honestly, if she was in the 5 or the 3, but that does say a lot that it was that close of a vote. I do remember running at the time. It was pretty much 50% of our debate conversation. And then when I did join the board, there was a recommendation at one point to just move it to 8:15. I'll never forget it because I think Chris Winters pretty much left over it because the reaction to it was so negative. Like you can't possibly do that. So I mean, maybe 8 years makes a difference, but people are still people. 24 hours are still 24 hours. I'm not, has life gotten better or worse, the same? I don't know. But I think that we really need to think about like, if we go right back to 7:30, it's not like everything's just going to go back, right? So we have to think about the trickle down effect. And there are things like, you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club. It's a small point, not something that one's probably thinking about, but that eliminates block 0, I assume, right? And that doesn't matter to a lot of people, but it does matter to my student, right? So, I'll be clear about that. So, and that I happen to know that because I'm a parent of that, right? There are probably like 15 other things that we've realigned our lives around as a result, which I'm not aware of, but you're now going to have to go off and do that analysis. And we're probably not even going to figure it out until we do it. And then we're going to be like, oh man, okay, we're going to have to fix that and that. So it's an attractive number, I have to admit. I have to admit that, you always have to do something personal. My kid went to practice at 5 o'clock this morning. So like getting up early in my house is really like, this is kind of late. But so this isn't going to like impact me personally, but I do have a kid that also probably goes to bed around 5 o'clock. So everyone is different. And there are families that are going to be drastically impacted by this. I'll get off my soapbox for scenario 5 for a second. I'm going to go to scenario 4 because I actually really think this is the one thing that in this short time frame the community responded to us on. And that's actually really nice because it's a thoughtful new idea that actually yields more than I thought. I thought that since the high school is the hub, you're going to really not get much out of not moving that piece. So it is interesting. I like it. I really think we need to pull the elementary schools though on it because man, that's a big difference. It could be awesome for working parents actually, when I think about it, right? Because you can drop your kids off at school and go to work. Obviously I can go to work now and my high school kids can get to school on their own, right? So it is the inverse. And in a lot of ways that might be super attractive to working parents. So, I do like that. And then I'm going to end with one question. I'm obviously not showing my hand yet on where I am on this because I don't really know. But why does the Greenwich High School in scenario 5 not move to 1:55 departure? Am I doing the math wrong?
You're doing the math right. We put it back to the exact same bell time that was before. But when we were doing the math, before we checked the bell time in the prior, we had the exact math you were doing. But the bell time that was before the change, it was 7:30 to 2:15.
So we had more instructional time? That's not a
Yeah.
bad thing, is it?
The blocks were longer and those were reduced by a certain percentage of every block time because the athletes would have had to leave so, early and then, they would miss academic time. And so they were trying to shorten that. And then they put in, then the next year when they realized that was an issue, that students were missing too many academic blocks to leave for, away games and whatnot. That was when opportunity block was put in. I think, and that was the meeting when Chris Winters, and I was standing next to him, had suggested, because the high school had been polled and they had suggested 8:15. And opportunity block was put forward, voted on in the same meeting, nobody had heard about it beforehand. And yes, the two of us walked out. But the one thing I would love to see is a poll of current parents from elementary through high school to see what their thought might be, because I think it does impact. There were so many unintended consequences when we first made the change, and Julie is shaking her head. It was truly dreadful, and I don't remember how many people here remember that, but it was a year or two of a lot of struggle, a lot of stress, and it's very easy to forget that now because we've gone, we've worked through it, but it was 2 or 3 years of real struggle for parents, for students, for traffic issues, and working with other districts, because we're, at the very bottom of Fairfield and everything is far away.
What happens to all the private school buses if we're changing our bus schedule? Because we're required to give those buses. Wait, what?
No.
They have their completely own buses. So it's,
No, but we pay for the buses.
yeah, doesn't matter. It's a different line. They're doing different things. They're going different places.
All 5 scenarios maintain the existing bell time for the private schools. And so that's the math in front of you shows no change to private schools.
The reason this drives savings is because it allows us to basically use one bus multiple times, which is why, in case the kid from the high school is listening, that's why we can't move it in small increments, because then it's a step change. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't know if anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Cody's straw poll, I'm personally a bit loath to approach scenario 5 for all the reasons Sophie mentioned and things like that. I do think, but to Karen's point, to Kathleen's point, I really think we have to think about if we're polling parents. Obviously we have to poll parents because the 8 of us shouldn't be making this kind of crazy decision for the whole community. But I think we have to think about how we ask the question, because nobody likes change. And if we can't just, if we just ask, hey, are you interested in starting an hour early? You're going to get one set of responses. So I think we have to be obvious, in the current budget climate, we have discovered that we could realize 1.3 million in savings if your elementary school starts at 7:45. How would this affect, on a Likert scale, how would this affect your family life or something like that? I think we have to be very honest about how we ask the questions. I think we can't just say, are you in favor of a 7:45 start time? Because that's not going to get us good data.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm happy to go back through, reams and reams of documents from all of the committees and all of the stuff that we discussed way back when, and all of the different scenarios that we looked at, and all of the unintended consequences that had occurred. Just if you want any of that data. My husband loves the fact that I have bookcases filled with all of the PTA, like all of the Board of Ed, materials from, I don't know, over a decade and some odd of doing this. So happy to pull stuff if if anybody else wants to look at some of those things. But yeah, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, I just want to keep in mind that, when we're trying to solve for such a big number and this is part of it, and we have to move quickly because we need to know what it is we're doing. And especially with teacher contracts coming up, we need some solid decisions pretty fast. So we don't have, 2 weeks to create some survey. Yeah.
Can we also survey our staff because it does impact them as well? If they have children, they have to drop off either here or in other districts and then have to be able to get to their jobs.
It may be an overly simplistic assumption, but I think you have to, you probably want to buy into the idea that something is going to change, either the elementary schools or the high schools. There will be unintended consequences. A poll will not prevent us from anticipating. We will still not be able to fully anticipate all of those. That's fine. I treat them in my head as a wash, and it's more of a question of, is the elementary school thing makes sense to me. And it's really like, if they were the same cost, I would do the elementary school one, and they're a different cost. And so that's the thing I'm kind of weighing. But to Tony's point, I really would not get caught up, and we should do a poll and a survey and this and that, because we just don't have that practical, we have too many constraints that don't really allow us to do it. And I believe in representative government enough to think that we can just take the leap on behalf of all of the parents that elected us, or some of us.
I don't know, this impacts 8,000 plus students. I mean, we haven't even looked at preschool hours here, if that makes any difference, but a lot of those students have families that have students at multiple schools. It impacts so much more than just, I mean, look, I walked in here saying, let's switch everything. In my brain, I was like, let's switch everything back. That's $2.5 million right there. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be painful, but it's unfortunately, the biggest bang for the buck. And it's hopefully not going to have such a negative impact on, the academics and sports and arts and other programs that we have. And I think we're having much more thoughtful look at it than just budgetary numbers. And I think that's exceptionally important. I think it's really, really important for us to consider the issues that may crop up so that we can try to figure out how to navigate those before they occur, which is not what we did the last time, which is why asking parents, like, we're looking at either scenario 4 or 5 per se, right? So, if you have students in the, how would, this is one of the things we're considering, how would this impact you? Those are ways we can hear about what issues may crop up, and if there's ways for us to, circumvent those before they happen. I don't know, but it impacts so many people in our community, parents, staff, and beyond, that I think it would be, and I was gonna say, it was like 2 years of discussion and months and months and months of Board of Ed discussions and debates. They had meetings with community members. They had a transportation study done. There were, pediatricians, and doctors that had come in and spoke, for us to just willy-nilly change it back. I think we really need to just get that input, even if it's just a quick survey. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, just looking at a bottom line without speaking to the people that it impacts,
But everything we do in the budget will impact everyone. So I don't know if it's we just have to pick which impact we want. And we have probably till Tuesday.
I get it. If you tell parents that we may be moving your school start time, this is we're sending out an email. Please respond by Sunday night or whatever it may be. And parents, this impacts people's jobs. And I know we're talking about that for everybody, but this is people that didn't necessarily think that, may change their childcare options. It may change. I think we just need to at least ask. We may be surprised by the results. Laura?
So, here's a thought. What if we don't do anything because we're being asked to either diminish our program to save money, we're being asked to change, a massive change that affects people's quality of life and probably their jobs. And what is the option of doing none of these horrible things and and going for an interim. And just saying, we don't want any of these. We don't want to do this to our community. We're being forced to do this by, a few people on the BET who hold the power. But what if we do absolutely nothing and then come back for an interim? And I have to say it out loud because it's going to bug the hell out of me. On page 23 of our budget book, we are giving the BET 4.219750 for over $4 million in our operating revenue that they take from us. And then they're asking us to come back to them with another 4 million in savings because they take all of our tuition from pre-K, they take our grant money, the town takes it all, and then they're telling us you have to cut this money to save $130 per person in town. And then we're asking the other pet taxpayers with kids in the schools to pay for their sports and their activities. It's mind-blowingly stupid. So I think we should just say no.
So look, I voted for the budget. I hear you.
But no
And
one
but-
has said to them, we are giving
But
you
look,
4
let's
million
play
a
that,
year.
but play this out because I think that's an important question. What if we just say no? So let's play that out because I think it's unresponsible because let's play that out. Well, let's say we just continue with our budget, right? And then we run out of money and we ask for an interim and that interim is turned down. At that point, we're stuck trying to find in the middle of the year, $4.5 million and we have.
Don't ask
not-
for
no,
permission.
no, but it's not a matter of asking for permission. I'm talking, let me finish my point. It's not a matter of that. We just don't, transferred the money. And at that point, we're looking at massive layoffs because we have not been able to do that. How has it never happened? How do we know we're going to get you? It's just simply not a responsible way
We're
to develop
being
a budget.
asked to cut our substitute budget so that if a teacher is sick, what do we call the parents and say, everybody stay home today? We're being asked to do the most ridiculous things by people I wouldn't put in charge of my goldfish.
I agree, but that's why we should go on. I'm not talking about the substitute. Let's go on with the other things the board.
You don't like your goldfish. I'm just saying.
We
And
lost our fish.
Laura, I like your revolutionary attitude. And I actually think that the appropriate time for that discussion or what I would recommend is considering having that argument when we have the best version of the budget we can make in line with the numbers that we're trying to solve for. Because at that point, I think it is a valid argument to say, hey, let's not vote for this. But I think as an interim step along the way, just trying to come up with what the best alternative is. And then we as a board, I'm not saying that I will vote with you, but I do respect the thought process behind it. I think it's quite creative. I think at that point, we can say, okay, we have this budget. We have an alternative option of just saying no. Let's debate that. But to help the team who's really working hard trying to finalize it, just get to the finish line on that alternative for us. I think any guidance we can give around this question is helpful. And maybe the guidance is we're relatively indifferent. And if we're relatively indifferent between, what we view as two bad choices, I actually think the elementary one is probably a net positive. But regardless, if we're relatively indifferent on those, then maybe that is the easiest way to get to that number. And then if we still hate it, we can, a majority of us can vote it down. But I just want to advocate for at least helping the team get to a final proposed budget for us to consider.
I can't speak for everybody else, but tonight's discussion and the things that we are facing now, I've been dreading this. I have been up nights. I will be up nights continuously, just like high schoolers. I have dreaded this discussion and the decisions that we have to make. But the unfortunate piece of that is that we've been elected by our peers in our community to make some of these decisions. One of the biggest responsibilities the board has by state statute is to put forward and discuss, is a budget. We did, and that's correct. I mean, I wrote out a whole thing. But it would also be irresponsible of us to not have these discussions because it's true, the what if scenario. Personally, I'd rather, have these discussions and say, we can't, there's nothing we can cut. But I also don't want to just force that back onto our superintendent and it's our responsibility as well. Sophie?
Thank you. I agree we should have a productive conversation tonight and be serious about doing a real analysis. I do want to make 2 points. One is per state statute, the town finance board is supposed to respond within 10 days in writing to the Board of Ed's budget, which most certainly the BET did not do that. And I don't think they historically have ever done that in our town, but I really look forward next year to reminding them that they have 10 days to come back to us with non-educational efficiency recommendations. So I assume that they will do that next year.
Why don't we just tell them they're late?
Well, I think we should remind them that they're late, yeah. And secondly, I echo your frustration, Laura, because I think, maybe we should cut $1.3 million in the budget of the substitute teaching, if that's what the BET budget committee, they did their 6 months of analysis of our budget, and that's what they decided is the appropriate thing to cut.
Did they though?
Well, that's what they said. I mean, that's what it was in writing. That's what it was, in their motion. So I just, I think it's worth noting that they had ample time to do analysis, and that's what they came back with.
And how much was that again?
I believe it was a $1.3 million cut.
So in theory, you could add that to scenario 4 and be in the same place as scenario 5.
Yes.
Except that we'd have no substitutes.
No, I mean, it's hysterical. Well, no, they just can't get sick. It's very clear. I'm
Well,
sure there's some actuary out there that's like blowing their mind right now.
I see Lil shaking her head, but I also would go out on a limb and say the one thing that they may not have looked at is the GEA contract, which I know is coming up for discussion this summer. But I'm pretty sure that there are contractual obligations that teachers have to only have a certain number of students that they teach per certain number of days or, sections and things like that. Like, I know it's not, I can't just be at the high school level. Am I wrong? That there's, well, we have class side guidelines, but I'm saying in the GEA contract, I don't have it in front of me at the moment. Like, there are contractual obligations that we have as to the number of students that each teacher is required, can teach up to. So if you switch that and we get rid of, if we get rid of subs and you have somebody who's out on paternity leave, or you have somebody who's out sick for a period of time, you're going to take a third section of an elementary school and then instead of having 20 kids per class, having 30, I don't think we can even do that contractually, right? I mean, I just want to put that out there.
Well, it
For
was a
6 months of
ridiculous
supposed,
suggestion.
yes, well, they did 6 months of study, somebody just said, so I wonder if they studied the actual contract.
Go to the second, we have the second slide.
And again, if on the next page is the advanced learning program.
Wait, did you want to take your straw poll first or no? Okay, perfect. I just wanted to respond to that. Now we move on to,
And again, I want to remind
Next one.
people, this is in front of you from a collective group across the community. So, we've heard from lots of different people. And this one is really, we were being asked to calculate what is the savings. So if we eliminated second grade ALP enrichment, the equivalent is a 2.2 FTE, which is 171,000. And then the next area that we were asked to calculate was looking at what if we took out grade 3 through 5 science. Many of you will remember the very first year that I was here, science had changed and then it went back in again. So we have had changes through the years with science, but eliminating science would be 257,000. So both of those together, it's right at 429,000. It's the equivalent of 5.5 FTE. Now that doesn't mean 5 full people, What it means is you have 22 ALP teachers out across 11 buildings. Depending on which way you go, they would either go several of them, whether half of them or all of them. A 0.1 would be reduced across, all the teachers, or a 0.2. And some of you will remember even pre-COVID, all of our elementaries had 1.7. So you had a full-time ALP teacher and a 0.7 ALP teacher. The challenge with that is they also had no writing. They now have a writing block, and that's one of the reasons we made that adjustment. So this is just the numbers. That's the money that goes with it. So if you have questions, we're happy to answer that.
I did just want to point out, because it is very easy for us to look at the bottom line. The last one was at least just buses, right? This is just when you're looking at the bottom line, just remember FTE isn't just a fun little number. These are actual people we're talking about. These are our educators and other staff members. So I just wanted to point that out, because I know that people up here understand that, but our parents and other members of the community who are looking at this, just know FTE is people. Just, no matter how many ways you want to divide it up. Do you guys have specific questions?
So make sure we understand here. So in this scenario, ALP would continue grades 3 to 5 in science, math, in math, literacy, and writing. Is that what it is? In three subjects? And how much of the school day is that?
3 hours.
3 hours?
I'm sorry, 2.5 hours because the science is.
So, oh yeah, no, you can't, no, you. No,
Yeah,
Catherine.
I was just gonna say, again, this is just this was mentioned, and actually we had a lively commentary on this in the public forum. The point of bringing this up, just like the buses, is these are some of the bigger blocks that we already have clear understanding of what the spending associated with them are, and taking a sense just from everyone here, if this is a direction we want to explore more, or if it's something we want to steer clearly away from. That's really all we're looking for here. And on some of these lower dollar cost items, it is certainly a lot easier to say, hey, steer far away from this. With the bus one, if we said scenario 1, that probably would be a little harder. But that's the point of bringing this up, as well as the next topic that we'll discuss, which I already sort of previewed. But if anyone has any strong feelings one way or another, or if you said, for example, I would never vote for a budget that cuts this or something like that, that's a very helpful thing to know as the team crafts a final budget.
I would never vote for a budget that supports this. Period, the end. And I think that beyond the fact of what we heard tonight from parents and students, I mean, my God, it's an amazing program. And I actually liked what some parents said, that not only does it help the ALP students, it helps the students in the general education classroom with the teachers having more time to give them personalized instruction as well. So to me, this is so short-sighted. I know that it's not something at all that Dr. Jones supported. I know this was put together by, I guess, a couple of unions, maybe some Board of Ed members. I'm not sure how it got on here, but it's not something at all I support. Frankly, disappointed that it's even been suggested. And this is a really, really important program. And not only is it important to our current schools, but I can tell you that people move to Greenwich because we're different, for the fact that we actually educate our gifted students. That is the only requirement under Connecticut state law, which I'm sure Cody will love, is to identify students that are accelerated or gifted. I'm sorry if I'm getting the terminology wrong. And but not to have to do anything about it. And Greenwich is one of the few districts left in the state that's actually doing something about it. And so I think it would be a real shame if we lost that edge.
When I was talking about not being able to sleep, this particular thought was, this particular discussion was top of mind. I have 2 students, one who started in ALP in 2nd grade when it was more than just enrichment in 2nd grade, and one who didn't start until third and beyond. And I know many kids who didn't start until fifth grade in ALP or middle school. I am exceptionally aware of how necessary and important it is for our students who move quicker, who, sit in class, bored and are just being asked to teach other kids in the class because they've already done this work. Important. And I'll never forgive myself for saying this, but if second grade ALP is simply enrichment and it's pushed in, it's something, I mean, I hate to say it, but I still think it's something we might have to consider. I wouldn't want to get rid of science, and I'm not even sure 171 gets us anywhere, but I still think it's something that we need to possibly consider if we have to get somewhere. I'm loath to even say that, but if it's just enrichment, because it's not pull out anymore, correct? And second?
Well, like they're not doing their core acceleration, which is, yeah.
Because I know before it was when second grade for ALP enrichment, when we moved to enrichment is instead of, it was push in at that point. So that's why I wasn't sure if it's still pull out, but I'm loath to even to suggest it, but I still think at this point, unfortunately, we have to consider everything that's on the table, but it kills me to say it's something I think we still need to discuss.
I just think that this number, I think the kids did a wonderful job tonight talking about how important that program is. And so I'm not going to repeat that, but I would say like these are relatively small numbers compared to what we actually have to get to. And this just feels like death by 1,000 cuts or path to mediocrity or whatever, like we're supposed to be striving for excellence. So why would we be getting rid of programs that everybody thinks are amazing? The students testified to how important they are. And I fully agree that they're important to the students who are in the program, and then the students who remain in the classroom, I think, benefit as much. So I would not be supportive of this.
I have to agree. I would absolutely not be supportive of cutting any instruction, any advanced learning program by any stretch. We want our kids to be the best learners. I think one of the parents said it great with keeping the vision and the mission of the board, and cutting instruction and cutting potential for students. I don't agree with that at all.
Wendy, I don't know if she had discussion.
I'm not really in favor of cutting an advanced learning program. I think that it helps set our school up to be great. I think we have our honors programs and our AP classes because we need to have these kids go into something. And I think it kind of protects those programs to make sure those don't go away. So I would not be in favor of cutting ALP.
Well, I think we have an answer there that nobody wants to do that.
That's great. This is exactly the sort of feedback we were looking for to help drive this process.
All right.
Can I just say I have a small item that the iPads that K through 2 uses. I think that kindergarten, I was talking to a teacher about this, and teachers have assured me that they only need 3 to 5 iPads in their classroom because they feel that they can do what they need to do using the smart board. And they're only on the iPads for like 1 hour a week anyway. So they feel like they could share them rather than having each child have their individual own iPad. So, and that would solve a little bit of our screen time dilemma that, we want to take kids away from screens. So is that something that any of you could get behind?
Wendy, let me just say, I can certainly go back and check, but I don't even think it's in our budget this year. The replacement we were talking about was the teacher laptops earlier. that
Okay.
Mike Ting has in the budget because they're all on a cycle, just like our curriculum management is.
Okay. Maybe you could take it out of the next one. Or reduce it, not take it out, but reduce it. We still need them. Don't you need to get new iPads every year for the kindergartners though?
No, because we moved the older Chromebooks down during COVID when we had to get faster Chromebooks for the upper grades. And then, so you've shuffled those down to the lower grades. So they move in, we're very savvy in how we utilize the devices and move them across the district, but we do not have to buy like brand new every year.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Does anybody want anything else to have there? I mean, I had some other thoughts, but I'm happy to wait till after we go through these slides.
So the next slide is the high school athletics. And basically, when we first started looking at it, the athletic budget for high school is, over $2 million. So it's a big number. We have a large athletics program. We're a large high school. And Ben, I'm going to let you just talk about how we backed into the 20%. We were trying to, I guess, get a fee that was even more reasonable for families. And before you start, Ben, I'll just share that Pete helped me today by looking at, in our region where they have pay to play. Ridgefield has it. They charge $150 per sport per season. Trumbull is $165, except ice hockey is $365. Wilton is $125. But our number, even trying to back into 20%, as you'll see, is higher than that. And those are the only three that we're aware of.
So this is what I was going to jump in. When we talked about this, and this was in a policy discussion, so Kathleen may remember this, was you and I remember who else was on policy at the time. No, I think it was just, maybe it was you and I and Christina. But whatever it was, we had talked about pay, I don't know if Tony remember this, we had talked about pay to play. We had talked about whole bunch of other things, and I had done a bunch of research, which I'm happy to go revise. But that's why I was just saying I have a whole chart because I had done a bunch of research of all of the districts around us. This was in 2020, I think, that I had done this. So I'd have to go back through the districts that had pay to play athletics or had alternatively had a student activity fee. And how they handled it and what they did. And for parents that have multiple students, some of them just had a cap on a family fees to do, anyway, fees for specific activities. Ice hockey was always more. Some of them also charged fees at the middle school level. And I'm happy to go back and in the next couple of days, at least just review, see if I can update this for you guys if you want to take a look. Yeah, well, I had a lot more. That's why I was saying, and it may have changed in the past few years.
Yeah,
And they're not the closest ones, because at that time it was Darien, New Canaan, Westport, Stamford, Norwalk, Fairfield, Danbury, Bridgeport. None of them had pay to play.
I think that's part of the whole big discussion about the situation we're in. So we will sit at the beginning of the year and compare ourselves to Durgay, because that's who we feel like our families, when they're looking for a school district, they're looking for a Durgay school district. That's Darien, that's New Canaan. It's not some of the other districts that are in Connecticut. And I think that it's important to remind ourselves that. And so I think Cody said it earlier, it's none of these decisions are great. They're bad decisions if we're really a top quality, high quality school district.
Well, that's why I was saying the research shows that I did then is none of the districts that we compare ourselves to, except Ridgefield and possibly, Wilton. Weston also had them at the time, had pay to play or student activity fees.
I want to, well, first of all, most of our sports at the high school are already a little bit pay to play, because we all, anyone who's had a student participate in sports in the high school, that we have booster clubs for most of the sports, and we need to raise additional money. And of course, the way that it is, it's not a requirement to give to the booster club. So the families that can give to the booster club do. So there is no barrier to entry to playing on a sports team if you are not able to contribute to the Booster Club. But to be clear, like it's not like this would be the first dollar that you're spending to play lacrosse, right? This would be on top of the amount that many families already pay to the booster clubs. And just, let's assume you have 2 sporty kids at the high school and they do 3 sports a year. We're talking about $660 a year per kid, $1,300 a year to have 2 kids playing 3 sports a year at the high school. It's a lot of money. And I think that's going to really limit the participation of some families in this town to be able to play sports. So I really do think it's a shame, and I think we need to play it out that way and really think about what the impact is on the families. I understand why we're considering this, but it's really expensive.
That's why I said, well, that's the only reason why I was saying I'd share, because the research I'd done, because back then they had caps for, per year, per family or whatever, so that you weren't paying for 3 kids with 3 sports a season.
Yeah, and I appreciate
If it's
that.
something that people wanted to look into.
I just think that then it becomes, for the athletic department, it's really complicated figuring out how many kids and, who has the ability to pay and all of that kind of stuff if we're going to try to do that.
Michael?
Right, I hear you. In the spirit of the better, worst options, I don't hate this one as much as the others, though, in all honesty, because this is not touching academics. And this is something that many of families, will be able to do, not happy about it, but I think this is something we have to consider. Obviously, we have to Sophie's point, we have to, just like we do for free and reduced lunch, we'd have to build in some kind of safety net and waiver for certain families, because we can't have it be a barrier for entry. I do know that, back in my hometown of New Jersey, when I was on the Board of Ed there back in 2007, we had to go to pay to play because that was a very different tax environment. So it's not uncommon in much of the country. It doesn't make it a good thing, but it might make it, as far as things that we have to swallow, I would do this over ALP or some of the other things, in all honesty.
Tony, you were the superintendent in a district where they had this?
Back in 2011, when the economy was challenging, I was in a district where we had to go to pay for play for that very reason. And it stayed in for a while. You can manage it, but there's pros in that you're generating revenue and offsetting your athletics. To me, the con is that it's hard when you're a high school student to have to go to your coach or go to your athletic director and say, my family can't afford it. Or your dad just lost their job, and you don't really want all your friends to know that your family is really struggling. And now you're putting a 16 or 17-year-old in a situation where now they're going to have to go ask, and some of them, quite frankly, won't ask their parents. They'll make the decision not to play. And it's not any different with free and reduced. If you look at high schools, especially large high schools, there are students who could qualify for free. They won't turn in the paperwork in high schools. And some of them just don't eat, because if they always get the same tray, other young people may know that they're on free and reduced. And that's just the reality. It has a lot of complexity to it. It's not as easy as it is to look at it on a slide.
Kathleen?
I was just saying, did you have a program at the school, the district you were in, to accommodate? I understand your point that it doesn't catch everybody, but were you able to come up with some sort of mechanism for, and if you could just comment on what that was?
Well, you're really looking at like your free and reduced list. And I would say in Greenwich, especially in Greenwich, you would almost have to have a new threshold with Alice. And in my district, we actually put that in for the meals program. So, and we were at the time using Alaska and Hawaii guidelines, because it actually takes into consideration cost of living that is more similar to Greenwich. So if you were doing that, the problem is you have to be able to have paperwork to be able to validate that a family's in that situation. And that's when it gets gets really difficult. A lot of families, even with free and reduced, as you know, every year during the budget, we say we're still trying to get the forms. You have to say how much your income is, a lot of private information. So it is hard to catch all of the students. And if students really want to play, then absolutely, but it does hurt a certain demographic of students. We have a lot of students, sure, that can pay and it wouldn't be an issue, but we have between 20 and 30% of our students who are in that kind of threshold. And if you probably added Alice, it's definitely 30%. It's a lot more than a lot of people think in Greenwich.
Do we know, I know we know our free and reduced lunch population at the school. Do we know what, is that the same mix for the 2,000 students that are athletes? Or maybe we don't have that data.
We wouldn't have that data because free and reduced is for each individual child is something we're not supposed to share openly for privacy reasons. So it's not like a coach would have a list and just look at the students. It has to be managed very carefully for privacy reasons. So I don't know for the athletes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it could change.
Kathleen?
Yeah. I mean, I understand how it's a thoughtful idea, and when we're stuck in a situation like this, that this is often the topic that is gone to. And it seems like, some school districts have had to do that, but this is kind of in the other category. This is a different category and out, but man, does that stand out when you're moving to Greenwich? Like, oh, you know what? Oh, I guess they can't afford sports. These are like, we're winning state championships left and right. And then it's like, yeah, but you need to pay to play here. I mean, it just doesn't feel right. And I do have to say that there was a family last night that they said, that I was speaking to, and they sort of said, we probably would be one of those families that would basically say, well, we're making a choice between our travel program and then playing at the high school. And that's not a family that I would have thought would have said something like that. So I take that as in confidence. But it was for a lot of people, they're budgeting everything, and then this kind of just knocks them one way. And you're right. I think some kids then probably don't know that their parents are in that precarious situation, and therefore don't even approach the topic. And that's just a bad feeling that I'd hate to put on anyone. So no, thank you on this one.
Yeah, I saw Wendy had her hand up, and so Wendy and then Jen, but right before Wendy said something, to me, I loathe to do this specifically because so many of our students are recruited to college based on the sports. So many students, and especially these kids who don't have the opportunity in the middle school to go out and do sports in private leagues, train and learn how to play the sport so that they can make it onto the teams in the high school, and they're getting scholarship funding, even if they aren't necessarily being recruited, but they're getting scholarships for some of this. It takes away their opportunities beyond Greenwich, takes away their college opportunities for some. I would, same kind of thing. Wendy?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this one either. I think it just creates a really uncomfortable situation with the children being embarrassed, and no one wants that. However, if we are considering doing this, then we shouldn't just limit it to athletes. We should look at other after-school programs too. I don't know, like the theater production. I don't want all the theater people to write me emails. That was just an example. But like, are there any other programs that are school funded after school?
Are you trying to get more emails, Wendy?
No, I don't. But I don't think it should be limited to athletes. So.
Plus, then all the NIL money is going to go away.
Yeah. I did see though that Darien does charge $100. I was trying to find on the website. They do a pay to play as well there. It's $100. I was shocked to see that.
Yeah, well, that's changed since I did my research. So there you go. Jen and then Cody.
Yeah, just kind of along the lines of what Wendy was saying, and not to, pick out a particular after-school club or other thing that the students can get involved in, but these become extensions of our day. You know, they become extensions of the school day. And to, as Wendy said, to single out athletics for something like this, not that I'm in favor of charging for athletics or for theater or whatever other programs there are. But I think, you know, we can't single out athletes. I do not agree with that.
Cody?
I think one thing that's interesting about Wendy and Jen's comments is the question would be, why single out athletes? And when I was just asking myself that, I was thinking does seem sort of arbitrary, but in one sense, part of the reason is because, you know, it's a big group that's easy to single out. But when you think a layer deeper, there's a lot of cost associated with the athletic programs, but the cost varies dramatically by sport. And I think you just mentioned that one of the schools had a hockey program where they charged more, but otherwise didn't. I was on the ski team at Greenwich High School, and I would imagine that that is a much more expensive program than the track and field program. Maybe one thing to consider, and I would just offer this up as, to the extent that anyone on the board has creative ideas around this. Karen made the point about 5.5 FTEs was basically the same cost as this. So when we're playing like thinking about a world of trade-offs, is there something that could be assembled in this category that would be a more desirable trade-off than, you know, full-time equivalents or something like that? And so I'm very intrigued by this subject or by this category, even though I know everybody will hate it. I think it's actually nice to kind of, assuming you can have a mechanism to help people that need the help, to localize costs, especially costs that don't align with kind of the broader strategic objectives and all that stuff. I understand the opposing arguments. I'm trying to offer just a different way to think about it. And so one thing to think about is you don't have to say $220 for every sport for every athlete. You could say, let's look at, is there an 80-20 where there's some programs that are just very expensive? And if it's a very expensive program, maybe you have some extra pay to play on it and only for those programs, and we're picking on them because they're expensive. And if we have a theater program that costs as much as the hockey program, then treat it equally that way. So you have kind of a unifying principle that treats those similarly. I think that would be an interesting thing to consider, and maybe that gets you substantially less money. But if you can get 200,000 or 300,000, that is then you have the question of, well, if you can keep three, people in a job that we think is important, is it desirable to have that trade-off? So just something for everybody to think about. And if anyone has any creative ideas or is amenable to that, that's helpful to know as we try to craft some of the solutions here.
Well, since we're talking about changing school start times because of the cost of busing, the question is I was thinking about this because at elementary, I remember when the kids would do field trips, we would have to, we'd have sign a form for permission and then send in a couple dollars to pay for the buses. Do we pay for the buses, the transportation for away games? So maybe we could look at the costs instead of pay to play. What's the cost of busing for away games? And that's something that, the booster clubs raise a ton of money. I was just curious.
If I can just say, it would take a little bit of maneuvering because as somebody pointed out earlier, all the revenue goes to the town.
I think I am totally going on a limb here without having any validation for this, but to Laura's point about being a little, creative and revolutionary, if the way we got to the budget number was including some revenue and we sent that back, I would be blown away if that was rejected, but I would stand on that hill with you, Laura, if that was not approved. But we can, hopefully, if any of the BET members are listening, if they could send us an email saying that they would view revenue increases and cost reductions as the same, that would be very helpful to understand.
Well, we have revenue that comes back to us from, preschool, and school, it goes back to the town fund.
Oh, yeah, I'm just
But-
saying
but-
an incremental change.
I'm
yeah.
saying there's other things like ECE funding and other things that are specifically supposed to go directly to the Board of Ed and they goes to the town instead. I mean, I've asked for years. Ben is sitting back there. He could probably, even when I was on PTAC, I was like, why aren't those funds going directly to the Board of Ed? Why do they go to the town? And then we have to ask for them. Like, so I still wonder that because I believe, you know, I don't know if it's statutorily, but it's supposed to go to the board.
Just on the, when I said, oh, maybe there's some creative other ways to do revenue, someone just sent me the idea, or they noted that the theater performances charge for admission, but our sports games don't charge for admission. Just throwing it out there.
They do. We weren't charging at least they weren't charging they were charging for football once we've got the new stadium up because we had the kiosk. That was what the kiosk is there for. I think the students get in for free with their student ID and then everybody else is supposed to pay. Pete, I'm like, I know
Well,
somebody's,
Yeah, when we go to 40 night games a year, we'll have a ton of revenue.
We're not talking about that right now. Please God. So are we charging?
So what we're doing is we're getting donations that are going to student activity funds. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. We are not charging. That's another, I believe that was another discussion back with Blaze that money that we were charging was going to the town, not to the schools, but we were paying for crowd control and police and everyone through our budget, one of my budget lines. So we weren't getting that back. So we're talking, Blaze at that point was trying to figure out how we could offset our budget of paying for police officers for football games and such, and crowd control people without collecting the money back. So coming out of COVID, we decided not to charge. And at that point, if I'm not mistaken, we're just collecting donations that was going back into student activities funds for athletics that we're using to try to give back to the kids on stuff that wouldn't come out of our budget.
I'm going to say what everybody else here is. I've said quietly. I'll say it into the mic. I think I literally heard it from almost everybody sitting at this table. You look like you have something to say.
The possible revenue source.
If
How
the
many-
town doesn't take it.
Well, no, I mean, well, this is what to Cody's point, he's suggesting the additional sources of revenue. So that is an additional source
They
of revenue.
take all our
Well, but that's
revenue.
what we're talking about as
But-
far as packaging it in the budget. I mean,
Right,
I
but if
think that-
instead of talking about what it is that we can cut from our budget, instead, like, maybe we reopen the discussion as to rental fees that we're charging for things. And even if the money's going back to the town, we're like, all right, well, we make X right now on rental fees. If we increase those again by another whatever, then we would be budgeting, X plus whatever, Y, and here's Z. So we're not cutting this.
How many people come? Sure. It varies. This year we had we didn't have much towards the end of the season. But for certain games, you could get a lot. I mean, coming up in our next season, we're playing some pretty big games. We're scheduled to play New Canaan, Darien, and Staples, which are usually big games. So it depends on the weather, the day, the time, that we're playing. Is it a Friday night game? Is it a Saturday game? Are there other stuff going on in the school? Is it an earlier game, a later game? So it does vary.
What if we just charge the out-of-towners, like the people who come?
So it's like a toll.
Yeah, it's like pay to see your kid play.
And maybe just, someone tell me if this is wrong, but is it fair to say that we feel like we're open-minded to some creative and/or fair revenue opportunities in this department? Or are there any things I'm just trying to get the guidelines because that's the single most helpful thing for the team.
I'm not.
I would. Oh, Ben. Oh, sorry. I didn't see Ben's hand. You go first, Ben.
I just wanted to put the admissions in perspective. Looking into fiscal year on 2018, the town had 14,180 revenue collected. That is a far cry from the $4.6 million gap that we're trying to settle for. Just to put admissions in perspective, pre-COVID, 14,180.
But you just mean, that's just from admission to
All gate
games?
receipts.
So I was gonna say, I just leaned over to Dr. Jones. I'm like, since you're talking about creative things, and I know I'm loath to even suggest this, but I just said, I was like, I wonder, has any, if other districts do this where you offer the opportunity, we talked about this when we were doing naming, right? Naming rights. But the wonder is if you choose certain types of local businesses that have to conform to whatever it is, right? Like this game sponsored by, I'm gonna go with, just so Chicken Joe's, because I know that they sponsor a lot of teams. Like, would they, if you're looking to create revenue streams, would
Yeah,
that be
Greenwich
something?
High School football brought to you by
It's
Budweiser.
not, no. That's why I said it has to be very specific list of things.
No, I like
It's
where
brought
you're
to you by-
going.
I was not going with Budweiser. I was going with Poland Springs because I'm still on my, I have to have 64 ounces of water a day discussion, but yes.
I think it's important to note too, that we really do have, 4.6 is a big number. And it's difficult to be working on that issue if we're talking about revenue that you have no idea if it's really going to eventuate. You don't know what number to plug in the budget. Is it going to be 10,000? Is it going to be like this pay to play is 455,000. That's a lot of gate receipts. It's just, we're talking about it. These are big numbers. So I think we have to really look at what is it we're actually reducing, even though we don't want to have the conversation because of that reason. And maybe this next year, as we prepare for FY27, we're looking, get a committee to work on it. How could we generate more revenue? And how could we get language with the BET so we can keep our revenue that is generated? But I don't think it's going to solve this problem.
That's a good point. Now, do you mind if I just ask everybody if the discussion on these other two, has that influenced the way anyone thinks about the trade-off between scenario 4 and scenario 5 for the buses? Just having a sense more of like when we talk about the magnitude of the numbers involved.
For me, I was going to say, I truly, I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to look at start time because it's such a big number. It's really something we can't ignore. It's not like we're saying, $100,000 here, 200,000, it's a small drop in the bucket, when you're talking about looking at $4 million, right? And so I think it's inevitable that we're, if that's the largest thing because of transportation, that maybe, it's truly something we have to, really say that's what that's the biggest bang for our buck there, so to speak. But to me, it doesn't change my looking at scenario 4 versus 5. I think to me, it's also, and you've even said this before when you're talking about budget, it's what makes the most sense for our community, right? What makes the most sense? And, we're not gonna have time to do transportation studies, but again, I think a quick poll of parents to see, which is gonna, less impact their, not just their students' lives, but their home life, making sure they have time with their kids at home, or, making sure they don't have to pay for a nanny from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. because they have to be at work or whatever it might be,
Is it fair to just say that is everyone imagine being, when you think about the getting to the 4.5, does everyone imagine either having scenario 4 or 5 in their buildup, or is anyone adamantly opposed to both of those? So it's at least we have the baseline of it should be 4 or 5. And then does anyone have particularly strong opinions one way or the other with those? Mike.
I like your framing and thinking at all three, because I think it's really hard to get to 4.5 million if you're using scenario 5 and pay to play. Now you're hitting the high school twice in many ways. I think I think you got to realize that, if we're getting the 4.5 and you have to make tough decisions, and if we have to go back and consider pay to play, that might bring us to scenario 4.
I wish we had the high school class president here. We could say, would you rather get to school an hour earlier or pay $220?
He's going to tell you he's got, how many was it, 23 days left? He doesn't care. I doubt that he would say that. Actually, he's very thoughtful individual, but.
I prefer scenario 4, both because it, doesn't impact the high school, but also because I think the earlier, if we're going to go earlier or later in elementary, I would rather go earlier. I just think the later is really hard on working parents. A 9 o'clock start is so late.
Does anyone else have strong views between 4 and 5?
I philosophically agree with you, Sophie. I'm just worried that we need a bigger number. It's that simple. Yeah.
I'm more in favor of scenario 4. I think it just makes sense. Little kids get up earlier than older children. So, and yeah, so I think it makes the most sense.
So here's, since I'm going to put myself out there as the most unpopular on the board today, since I'm like, well, I guess we have to look
No,
at
Karen,
out.
that's my job.
Good. Well, then I'll give it back to you. But so here's another question. We talked about advanced learning, right? The elementary level. And I know we've had discussions at the beginning of this school year in regards to, or some changes in FLES, right? Foreign language. How many foreign languages do we offer at elementary? Just Spanish? I know there's 1 or 2 schools that offer more because it's part of their, only JC. So, okay, so JC is the only one that offers more than Spanish. Okay, and then at the high school, at the middle school, we offer at least 3, right? 2. Is it just French and Spanish? Okay, I thought for some reason I thought we had, so then it's more at the high school. All right, because I was gonna say, we talked about the reduction there, not that I want to reduce again. And then last year, we talked about changing the amount of hours we did for PE. When we talked about this, it was before I was on the board. It was when Ralph was the interim superintendent. He talked about, and it did not fly. Nobody liked any of them, but it was, yes, reducing, getting rid of intramural sports or sports at the middle school. It was changing and increasing class sizes. It was a reduction of offerings at the elementary and middle and high school, right? So some of the classes that weren't as much, as subscribed to. We offered, for offering busing for 0-hour classes, depending on what we're doing here. So we don't do busing for 0 hour. Okay.
The bus picks them up and drops them when they're going past the school.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have cost.
Sorry, I feel like we should just hone in on what we have in front of us, and we have a lot of work to do after that. So, I think that, Cody, I think we kind of have some thoughts here, right? It seems very clear that I don't know, is scenario 4, sorry, we're doing a straw poll. Was that kind of rising to the top, or? I didn't really give you a view. I kind of said I philosophically like scenario 4, but I'm worried about the number. Did anyone else have a strong view?
Is anyone in favor of scenario 5?
I'm in the just say no camp.
I'm not in favor of anything we've discussed, but, in the exercise we're doing, and since we have to, I'm still open to a discussion on scenario 5. It's not my preference, certainly, but if it's it's more, it's over $1 million more.
Would
I'm not in favor of any of this.
would you all humor me with, you don't have to answer this, but it would be helpful if you had to pick between scenario 4 and the pay to play as we outlined, or scenario 5?
Scenario 5.
Scenario 4, pay to play.
Or is it not participating, which I respect?
Laura's like, I'm not voting for any of this. I mean, I don't know.
I suggested getting rid of the library books.
I love it.
Not buying more, just selling the ones we have.
We should have a big.
You have a big book sale. I mean, there you go, revenue generating. Who needs books?
Just to be clear, I'm not in favor of any of these, but we do have, our budget is $12 million over last year's budget. So I am confident that we can find some efficiency somewhere that maybe aren't these. Can we go back to the drawing board?
Oh, you would, and
I do, aside from the, I do like, not like, I do, if we have to pick one of these choices, then I think the early school start time for elementary is what I would look at, but let's look at some other things aside from everything else.
So I'm just going to add in for earlier start times for elementary. Somebody just reminded me, one of the big issues and the reason that we didn't do it back in the day is because you have to remember daylight savings times, like in the winter, when it's cold, it's dark and it stays dark much earlier. And you have the youngest of our students standing outside waiting for the buses in the cold, in the dark, and it's a major safety issue. So just, I'm putting that out there because it was one of the, somebody just reminded me, that's one of the things I had forgotten. That's why I said I'm happy to go back through all those other things, but that was just something to put out there.
And
Speaking of lights.
I think Wendy made a good point that the whole it's all an exercise in trade-offs. It's not being in favor of them. That's why I think the thought experiment of pay to play plus scenario 4 or scenario 5 is a good one. Scenario 5 is 55% of the way there. Scenario 4 is 28%, but if you do pay to play, then it's not quite all the way, but that's a big chunk. And so that obviously helps then clarify what the remaining pieces should be. But I would expect that there's not going to be any magical cut, right? There's nothing that is going to come forward that everyone's going to go, oh, this is so great. I'm so excited this is here. I'm glad we said no to everything else. It's all going to be a set of choices between things that people will find not super desirable. So I just want to, being the bearer of bad news, like thinking about these trade-offs is a helpful exercise, at least for guiding Tony and Ben and Patrick, who are doing really thoughtful work on all this.
Yeah. And sorry, can I just add one thing, just to sort of put the numbers again, and correct me, Ben, if I'm wrong, but we're basically now only going to have, since with a 4.5 reduction, it's like a 5.5 million year-over-year increase. Our teacher salaries went up 5.8 under contract. I forget what the administration salaries are going up, and then buses are another $1 million. So year-over-year. 5.8 million. I'm talking absolute dollars. So 5.8 million of the, now we only can increase the budget 5.5 million, but I need everyone to appreciate that while it sounds like a big number, it's not, okay? Because your teacher contracted salaries are going up 5.8 million, as well they should. That's actually not a very big number in the overall scheme of things. And then your buses are going up another well over $1 million. So you are cutting a lot from other things, okay? Because your contracted costs are well over 7 million, okay? So as a result, you have to do this. You have to do transportation effectively. You're effectively making the trade in transportation, right? For the increase. And now you're looking at reducing heads. Okay, it's that simple. So I don't want to keep like moving, like you have to sort of think about the absolute figures just for a second. Stop. Like, let me just lay it out for you clearly.
Well, you brought up an important point that our finance board, those crack individuals who are supposed to be at the top of their game, forgot to include our contractual obligations when they were doing our guidelines. So that's where we are, because addition and subtraction is really difficult for some of them.
Well, I wouldn't say it that way. I was to say that, look, when we do these contractual negotiations and, the BET has a member there at the table, they are part of it. They vote on and approve these contracts. Yes, they made a mistake and they also forgot $1.7 million, I believe, right? Of contractual salaries, right? So you definitely think about the fact that part of the flawed process, comes from just last year. Last year, the BET decided to approve the consolidation of several Board of Ed departments with town departments, right? There were two things and they eliminated, they eliminated those things. So that was over $313,000 from our budget, and discovered afterwards that the decision was made without really, there was no adequate debate on that feasibility. And it later emerged that the consolidation was impractical and didn't work. And then it's forcing the board back to, we had to somehow figure out where to find that $313,000 this year, because they didn't think about that. And they just made the decision without actually reaching out to us. And Well, after the fact,
No,
during them?
the day that they were making that decision, Mr. Brannion still worked for the town. He was head of the town. I worked for the schools. We had a meeting with them and said, we both had concerns that it was not going to work. I mean, the school does a tremendous amount of purchasing, and the idea that you think the town is going to be able to manage all the purchasing that happens for the school, we both knew it wasn't going to work. And it was a decision that was made with, without a discussion during the budget process at all. But now we are just over that 300,000, we have a hole because the BET doesn't really have the authority to tell us what, we can do from a line item perspective. They just removed the money from our budget. And so now that's why we're trying to plug that hole.
I mean, it just harkens back to the fact that our budget isn't created and pulled out of thin air. It's developed through a collaborative, thoughtful, and exhaustive budget process. Dr. Jones and the administration have dedicated months to developing a budget. And that's critical for running our schools efficiently and ensuring outstanding academic experiences for our students. And then it comes to us, and the board spends weeks and weeks examining the budget and looking for potential reductions. We cut already $500,000 before we, gave the budget back to the town, which is consistently overlooked. This year we approved this, a proposed budget by 7-1, confident that it was tailored to support our mission without any extras, right? Any covered contractual costs, and did not have any fluff. We've gone through this exercise year in and year out and gotten rid of almost every efficiency we could, and so, now we're talking about the impossible.
I just want to answer Cody's question about if it was 4 or 5, including pay for play. And I would go with 5 over doing 4 combined with paid for play, because I feel like pay for play is putting a burden on our, neediest families. And that's just what it is. And the idea of the cut to the budget, the cut that the BET made, they said they were doing that because they want to keep Greenwich affordable. And making a cut and then saying, hey, families struggling, now you have to pay $220 a season for your student to participate in sports. Like, that is making living in Greenwich much less affordable for all of those families in a really significant way. And it's a lot more costly than actually paying for the increase, on a per household basis. This is much more expensive for those families. And so I'm totally opposed to it. And I would rather go, as much as I don't think we should do the early bus, if that's what we have to do for the high school, I would do that, because at least it impacts everyone the same, regardless of, what your family circumstances are.
I feel like we've gotten some helpful guidance for the budget work. Does anyone else have any other commentary? Or thank you all.
I was actually going to say thank you to you and to Kathleen and other members of our budget committee. I did Laura and Michael Joseph and, our administration for really taking, I just said Michael Joseph, for taking the crack at this. Nobody wants to do this. It's painful. It's something that we're all dreading. And, I appreciate the way that you are trying to go about this, to try to find the things that might be the least impactful for our classrooms, and our staff. But, it's not a fun exercise, which we will continue, I guess, on Tuesday. Next on, so no other, no, it's okay. So the next item on our agenda is to consider the superintendent's contract extension, and to put this on the table, I will make a motion. Well, I'm going to make a motion, and then if you want to do that, that's fine, but to have a discussion even, right? So I was going to make a motion to extend Dr. Jones' contract to 2 additional years through June 30th, 2028. I don't know if there's a second or if somebody wants to table, but okay, so if you seconded it, discussion.
This is so awkward that we talk about this. Like Tony's not here.
Well, no. So that's what I'm saying. I know we put this on. Dr. Jones is following the information that's, the process that's outlined in her contract, and there's specific timing involved in there as to when she asks for a contract extension, which is what she did. And it is our responsibility to follow that as well. So we put it on the agenda. And I know in the past, last year when we did this, it was 2 or 3, like 3 or 4 meetings. And then we had to do something at the start of the school year with other parts of it. And I just don't want this to drag on. I know that we have not had an executive session to have a discussion about this. And, if you guys would prefer, because it looks like you guys are all fading, if you would like to table this and we can add an executive session on Tuesday.
I would like to
discuss
table
that?
this and do an executive session on Tuesday.
I agree.
Cody, Wendy, don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I
know you're-
agree.
You will not have an objection for me on tabling this, given that
Okay.
it's almost 11.
So that at which point, like I said, I had to make a motion in order to get this on the table to have a discussion. I will withdraw my motion and we will table this and I will look to add this as an executive session for discussion on Tuesday. No, we're not there yet. We have agenda plan discussions. My agenda plan is no, that was next year's. This year, we're talking about, so clearly we need to add a meeting with an executive session for Tuesday. I'd heard from everybody. I know Cody had said he has something, so he'll have to dial in for, if and when you can.
Yeah, I'm just in DC, but I can work around it once I have the schedule.
And then I wasn't sure about Wendy and Michael Joseph.
I might need to join late because I think my son has a track meet.
Okay, that sounds fine. Certainly, we have to put our families first here. Okay, so is there anything else we need to discuss regarding this year's agenda? Yes. We had to add the policy.
Well, I would, yeah, there's policy items, but I don't think we have to put that on the agenda plan. One thing, though, we talked about last time is, remember, we had the STEM update, and one of the things we said is we have the STEM update, but why don't we do that? Why do we do that just for STEM? Why don't we do that for literacy and social studies? So it would make sense to have a similar thing to the STEM update, in the spring. Right, exactly. I don't know if
we do, we rotate and
we don't.
I'm
No,
pretty
we
sure.
have,
Okay, I'll go
no,
back
we
and
have
look.
a STEM and obviously literacy is our lagging indicator, particularly in middle school. So it'd be good to,
Yeah, we have
have
that coming. I was gonna say also be good to add, we, discuss it, especially when we're talking about literacy and math and so forth, in regards to strategic plan
Mhm.
goals. So maybe want to wrap it in as a strategic plan update and then we can have an update on those. What are your thoughts?
we have that. We have the.
Yeah, oh, it's already being planned. She said it's just not on the, yeah. Since Cody said it was 11 and he's very happy to move forward, unless anybody else has for the agenda planning for this year, I'm going to let you be the proud motion maker.
I've never done that before, so I'm kind of nervous.
Do you have a motion, Cody?
I guess I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Who wants to second? Laura, Wendy? I'll give it to Wendy. Wendy never gets to second that. Sorry. All in favor of adjourning? Dang, almost 8. Okay, perfect. Now we have unanimous 8-0. I know we've adjourned, but I would also say to the public who's maybe still awake and listening, please do reach out to us. We do want to hear thoughts. I'm sorry to flood everybody's inboxes, but I think it's exceptionally important that we're transparent. I'd love to. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in and staying with us so late. And please do share your thoughts with us because we're open to almost any idea, I'd say. Thank you and good night.